Hello, hello. How are we all doing tonight? Guy is not. There we go. What's up, everybody? How is everyone's Sunday? Not hearing my audio, which is good. I'm gonna need that for this one. Let me see here. So I can see that it's picking it up there. 1 second, guys. Yeah, I would do it. My headsets weren't actually switched on. I am a genius. Let's freaking go. Okay, working now. I can hear things. I make the background of your little PNG tuber transparent. The background of mine for plus is just black. Okay. Sure, I can answer that. So, I actually have the background to my PNG tuber set to magenta, and I just have it on a color channel. Actually, let me see for a second. I remember if I have like on a chroma or color. So if you add a filter, if you go right click and go filters, you can add a new one, and I'm using color key to key out the magenta. So it's not actually transparent. Like if I were to turn off the filters, look, it's pink. But I just put the color key on and I key it to magenta, and it looks fine. It looks fine. The music is a bit loud. Let's see if I turn it if I turn it down now, we won't be able to hear the video later, so okay, speaking of which, so here's the plan. I'm planning on playing Revolution 60, which is Brianna Wu's game, on Thursday. So I've been morbidly curious for months. Just very curious what this game is actually like. So I figured as a precursor to that, we could watch Dead Domain's video, which is brand new. I wanted to like brush up on my knowledge on Brianna Wu, because like I've seen her being a pest on the internet, like this awful troll. And I was like, I should probably research her before I play the game, just to figure out what I'm working with, but Dead Domain did that for us. So let's go. Okay, I'm gonna stop the music. Let's go. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna pull it up in case we need it for a break, and then we're gonna go... Make sure I don't bosh myself. There we go. Who is Brianna Wu? Well, we're about to find out. She's somebody who tried to make a webcomic, couldn't do that. She tried to make video games, couldn't do that. Tried to get into politics, couldn't do that. So instead, she became a regressive trans woman that thinks that most trans people are faking it for attention. We love to see it, babes. She is a Blair White wannabe, basically. I feel like if you're a wannabe of Blair White, of all people, that's really sad, actually. Yeah, she is a Professional Twitter yapper. I think that's what her official job title is, because she yaps way too much. Who is Brianna Wu? A woman I forget all the time. Yeah, I think most people forget her. Okay. So this video's runtime is 2 hours and some change. So the thing is that that's a lot of time for a stream. Do you have Miss Dead Domain? Do you have... Oh, you don't have chapters. Awesome. Okay. We're gonna try to, like... Well, I mean, like, I'll pause it and interrupt it a lot. Otherwise, I'm just stealing content. But I'll try not to be repetitive. This is me doing research, and you're all here with me. Okay. It's playback. Playback speed. Let's go 2, because I haven't watched a Dead Domain video in a while. I remember watching her, like, I'm going to go into the Jehovah's... I think that was her. And she went to the Kingdom Hall and pretended to be cis. Let's go. Oh, hi, Anthony. Let's go. I'm digging this opening. I'm digging the opening.
I always to how Venus, you take too many chances, you're too wild with people.
Whoa. Okay, maybe we have to go playback speed normal, and then if it, like...
I always to how Venus, you take too many chances, you're too wild with people in the street.
This is one of the final scenes of Jenny Livingston's classic 1990 documentary, Paris is Burning, which explored the underground culture of New York drag scenes and the people in it. The woman here is Venus Extravaganza, a trans woman and performer and aspiring model who had also taken to sex work in the hopes of paying for gender reassignment surgery. In the film, she recounts narrowly escaping a violent encounter with a man who discovered she was trans on a date. During the filming of Paris is Burning, Venus, a few days anybody in the physically curious with bringing out a post where she...
Here we go.
On January 3rd, 2025, Brianna Wu tweeted a response to someone calling out a post where she decried progressivism as...
We're starting off strong, I see. I'm not a trans woman. But I'm gonna be real with you, Brianna. Not only do you not speak for the trans community as a whole, but I don't think you speak for most trans women. Let's see. Many trans women go into sex work because a lot of us have autogynephilia, and being objectified is erotic for us. Wow. That's 8. What I love is when weird people try to normalize their weirdness by saying it's like, oh yeah, everybody's like that. It's like, girl, that's just you.
The reason for trans people's current political woes. Her response was, many trans women go into sex work because we have autogynephilia, and being objectified is erotic for us. And the first thing I thought of when I saw this post was Venus. I thought about all of my friends who had been turned away from jobs because they were trans, who had been forced into sex work by circumstance or other people who had survived only on it and who had been stripped of their dignity because sacrificing that dignity was the only way they could sometimes eat the 1 or 2 meals they got a week. And I bring up this decades-old documentary not just because it's personally resonant, but because it shows how long this kind of thing has been an accepted part of queer and trans life. Exploitation isn't new for people who know and maintain community with other trans people. This reply, like most things Brianna said,
because, like, I mean, like, you know, I'm not gonna preach to the choir too much. I'm sure you guys know this. you can't get any other work but sex work if that's the only option, because every other job is allowed to fire you because you're trans. So therefore that makes it so sex work's the only accessible kind of work that you can get. That's really the only kind of work you're going to be able to do. And then even if later down the line um policies become more progressive and you are protected as a trans person, not only do you already have that reputation as a sex worker, and like you can't go become a teacher if there's a bunch of your, like, especially if you do cam work or something, you can't become a teacher after that. You can't become a doctor after that. They won't fucking let you. um so then what happens is you personally get pigeonholed into being a sex worker or something. Not only that, because of that, it's like, oh well, all trans people are sex workers, and you know they strip you of your dignity as an individual, but it also does that to the group as a whole, because now trans people have reputation for this, so they get pigeonholed as a group because it used to be the only thing that you could get. So trans people clawing their way into the workforce with dignity is basically impossible. So to hear, Jesus Christ. And the thing is that it's funny to me because Brianna Wu can't get a job in anything other than her weird, like, fetishy, like, whatever. Anyway,
About trans people with
you
such
think she'd
authority
get it.
is not based in fact or even really in her personal experiences. Unless you want to say
Exactly.
she finds the idea of being objectified personally titillating, which is certainly a valid reading of what she says here. For the record, I don't think that's what she's getting at, but it would tie into a very common theme in Brianna's work, which is a consistent fetishization and reduction of what it means to be a woman.
Hold on, I'm curious. I hate this, by the way. What is this? For another thing, okay, see, this is awful. But I also think that probably she wrote this herself, because I know that she wasn't initially a target of Gamergate. She jumped on the grenade about it. Do I get to know when she came out? Here we go. Jesus Christ, girl. I just want to understand when she came out. I feel like that's way more relevant to. Mm-hmm. Mm. So she was with like early. Mm. Because she does act like she tends I yeah. Do pre-transition career. Several Republicans until 2022, 2002, I should say. Transaction 1988. It's content for 8 years. Okay, so in the mid 2000s, it started Homeworlds 2006. So by the time she was releasing these comics, she was already out and living as a woman. Okay, I was just curious. Because this came out in 2012. I was just interested.
Something we will examine
But
later.
it's like makes sense why she's like, I started before everybody else did. Like that whole thing. So it's like, I'm not a trender like some of y'all. Yeah, this comic failed, by the way.
Brianna likes to play at being an authoritative voice for the trans movement. In the last few years especially, she has turned away from progressivism and has attempted to engage right-wing and even far-right voices, courting TERFs, all in the name of being a reasonable voice for the trans community, something nobody asked her to do, but she's still taking it upon herself. Now,
Here we
I
go.
want to be open and say that because I had so many questions from my time looking into Brianna's history, I did attempt to reach out to Brianna multiple times through multiple avenues to sit down and have an interview.
I wonder how that
She
went.
had blocked me on multiple websites, and I'll be honest, that is completely fair considering some of the not very nice things I've said about her. Mostly at the time, those were reactions to what I saw as her abdicating the responsibility to help other trans people instead of her throwing other identities like non-binary people, like myself, under the bus. So I can't blame her for not being open to discussion. I maintain that I earnestly did want to hear her take on most of the things I discussed in this video, and if she watches it and wants to sit down and have a convo and set the record straight, my DMs are open to you, Brianna. That being said, she did respond to some other folks who asked for an interview in my stead by labeling me a weirdo degenerate. Again, no hard feelings, Brianna. I don't like you either, and I don't want to be your friend. But I also at least try to be a little fair in my assessment of people, and just because I don't like somebody doesn't mean I don't want to depict them honestly, which is why I found it somewhat annoying that she would say this within a few hours of platforming just dick.
As part of my political project to give normal, non-degenerate trans women a voice, I have an announcement. If you're a weird sex freak claiming to be a trans woman who announces your freaky sex life constantly on social media and you come after me, I will not pull punches. I have no fucks to give. You people have spoken over us for far too long, and we should have said how embarrassing you are ages ago. Brianna, honey, every girl you ever drawn looks like a stripper, so, like, shut up. You can't say that and then hypersexualize women at every turn. You don't get to say that. You're a hypocrite. She's a hypocrite, right? Am I crazy? She's such a creep, and yet she's like, if you're like a creepy pervert, says the creepy pervert. Okay.
Heads like Lior Sapir or Richard Hanania. See, she placates these figures by essentially saying they're right that some trans people are evil and are grooming kids, but not all trans people, not the transes like Brianna. And as I'll show, this is just the latest in a long line of what sure look like shifting grifts for Brianna Wu. During her time in the spotlight, she has had many titles, from congressional candidate to game developer to artist, question mark citation
because
needed,
she's a
and at
fucking
every step of her journey,
failure and
she's managed to
isn't
claw
good
her
at
way to slightly
anything.
more relevancy, leaving a long list of enemies in her wake. I'm not going to sugarcoat my words. I want to be as clear as possible why I took on this project. If there's a thesis to this video, it's this. From everything I've found, from all the information available to me, and that I've heard from first-hand sources, Brianna Wu is a volatile liar and a fraud, and should have no future in any kind of political analysis or creative endeavor.
Yes.
Let alone representing any group of people.
Let's go.
Because there are so many concurrent themes running her story, this
Take
video
no
will kind of be all
fucking
over the place, but I necessity.
punches.
There's no way to talk about the totality of Brianna's various controversies without jumping between them to show the decades-long patterns of her behavior, but I promise, it's all leading to the overall point. Brianna Wu should never be taken seriously by anyone. I haven't just trawled through old forums and found some dirt. I've spoken with several anonymous sources that knew her, interacted with her directly, and even worked with or under her. None of them had very nice things to say, by the way. In fact, most people I talked to who worked with Brianna don't seem to. Brianna Wu is not a genuine person. I know this because I've seen how she acts in private, where she often plays the role of a mean girl. Talking shit about others, often over their appearances or their optics rather than any kind of principled stances. Even the people she will publicly claim to ally herself with, like Destiny, aren't safe from her insulting them when she thinks nobody else is watching. Another example is the time she speculated about Shoe on Head being the victim of assault. Or, as I'll show later, how she has often attempted to hire people to create dossiers on who she deems her political enemies. But this is going to be a long video, so stash that one away for later. And I have evidence for everything I'm saying, by the way. She seems to only care about optics, not right or wrong, which is probably why her opinions have shifted over time as she makes her broad pivot to being a dollar store Blair White. Additionally, I've had several people share their DMs with me from Brianna and stories of how...
Oh my god. I freaking called it. I called it. I also said, didn't I say that at the beginning of the stream that she's like a wannabe Blair White? Sorry, I was eating a cracker. I forgot I was muted. Forgive me. Forgive me for my cracker eating ways. That bitch eating crackers. I'm sorry. Okay. I find that funny that I'm not the only one who saw it. Because, like, yeah, no, absolutely. Also, hi, Melena. I'm not even going to try to talk today. Okay. All right, let's go.
She's attempted to bully them and force them into stepping into line, particularly in recent years as she's taken it upon herself to represent that reasonable trans population. Some of these I will also share later in the video. These are just some of Brianna's more duplicitous facets that will pop up throughout what can loosely be called a career. Like
okay,
let's
get through the
here. That's not to say Brianna isn't a liar.
Okay, she's a liar, she sucks. Let's get to the juicy stuff.
Brought her home to Hattiesburg and paid for a bed at Pine Grove, where Tiger Woods would later be treated for sex addiction. End quote. She's also publicly posted pre-transition pictures that confirm her identity as the person we're about to hear stories on. Now, I don't really care if someone ambles through college to find their direction in life. I did it, plenty of people do, regardless of economic bracket. I'm also not interested in talking about Wu's time in rehab. The reason I included the full paragraph was to talk about her lifelong links to Republican electoral politics, because that is going to come up later. The real problem is that despite not graduating, many interviews in the future would regard her as a graduate from Ole Miss, even.
So yeah, Brianna comes across as the kind of person that only jumped onto the progressive side to basically only be tolerant enough to accommodate herself. And now that there's kind of a space for conservative trans women, a la, you know, Caitlyn Jenner and Blair White, she's kind of trying, it seems like she's trying to kind of slip herself into that niche as well. But she was she's a lifelong Republican like supporter, then yeah, she was probably only in quote unquote progressive spaces to be just so that she could tolerate herself. And you see this, I think you see this a lot with like certain gay and trans people who like they seem to change their mind back and forth, because it's not that their opinions are changing or they're growing and developing as people. They're just trying to find a place where they can be a bigot, but still it's just progressive enough to accept them. Brianna Wu is not alone in doing that. This happens very often. Be sure not to skip the sexy KKK versus MLK. Oh my god. Anthony! Why would you? The what? Okay.
Her own website claiming she graduated from there, but there isn't really much of a record of her actually finishing that degree. And on her LinkedIn account, for example, it says she attended from 2003 to 2008 and majored in journalism and political science. Her LinkedIn bio currently reads, quote, Brianna Wu is a software engineer, entrepreneur, and outspoken advocate for women's rights. One of the most prominent women in technology, Brianna founded her first $250,000 startup at 19. In running for U.S. Congress, Brianna is working to bring a new generation of voices and values to Washington. And already you can see some of the aspects of Brianna that would become recurring themes in her story, namely depicting herself as far more qualified than she actually is, saying she's a startup founder at 19 without mentioning that said startup was shuttered and had nothing to show for the effort. Also pursuing journalism and political science, something to note moving forward, as she shows a shocking amount of acumen for either of them. Brianna likes to talk about her time in college as a reporter, and there are articles written under her name before she transitioned to verify this. She worked at the school newspaper covering school newspaper things, but according to later forum posts, she would depict this as being on a crime beat. Maybe she did cover crimes at some point. I wasn't able to find any articles to back that up.
Look, Mark, you know this. Like, you just showed that heartbreaking TikTok at the video at the beginning of this. That 3-year-old girl on the ground. That breaks my heart. I got my start in journalism, like covering police successes in Mississippi, which is very racialized.
Brianna had always been interested in being an artist and tried to get a comic she was writing into the local paper. And according to some forum gossip, when she was denied, she blew up at the teacher and person who ran the newspaper, calling them both slurs, namely calling the teacher a sand N-word.
girl. Oh. You sent it to me, Spaghetti? Okay, hold on. Where is this? We need to take a closer look at that picture. There we go. When did you send this to me? Did not send it to me. What a fucking liar. Spaghetti is in here lying in my freaking YouTube chat. The regional N-word modifier. I need to go get a drink. I'll be right back. I had to get Fresca so that I could work through the pain. Okay. Why do all of her characters look like that? Okay. Let's go.
Now, I want to tread very carefully here because there's very little to go on for verifying this incident, but I do think this kind of meltdown, taking offense over her artistic ability, and the fact that she did work for the newspaper are all entirely compatible with Brianna's trends of behavior sense and line up with the timeline of her career, particularly the anti-Arab slur. While she might not be slinging such harsh language anymore, she's still blatantly racist towards Palestinian people. The first time I met her, I was the opinion editor at the Daily Mississippian, and I turned to see this creepy fuck standing behind me. I shook her hand, and she pulled away, saying, "Ow." She then explained she'd broken her wrist in a bicycle accident that had almost killed her and given her amnesia. She explained that she wanted to be a columnist, and she had previously worked for George W. Bush in the White House, but she had since realized how R-slur and evil all conservatives were. About this time, my phone started ringing, and I politely ignored it while I talked to this girl. Then it rang again and again until I answered. It was the managing editor, who had ducked behind the front desk and was whispering, "Stay calm and don't react to this, but this girl isn't supposed to be here. She has a restraining order. Get rid of her." By this point, I was concerned that this girl might knife me at any moment, so I told her to write 3 columns, and that I'd evaluate them and get back to her on whether she could write them. Parenthetical, I'm so proud of my ability to remain poised and convincingly pretend that the Daily Mississippian had any fucking standards. Turns out, a year prior, she'd come in wanting the Daily Mississippian to run a comic strip she had been doing. When she was told they weren't interested, she flipped out. She called one of the workers a fat dyke, and when Dr. Husney came to her defense, she called him a raghead and sand N-word.
Okay, let's look at her comic for a second, because this is what I'm interested in the most, is her creative endeavors, right? This is what I'm personally interested in. That's why we're doing this, because I want to play her game. I want to torture myself. Let's see. Brush Week at the Beta House. The thing that makes us different is friendship. Absolutely. We're all friends here. They all look the same. People say we betas are just boozy, cutthroat socialites. I say we're the future leaders of America. In fact, since the campus is 80% Greek, you have to pledge, unless you want to spend your Friday nights in coffee shops with the guys that perform in Oklahoma. Did I mention our commitment to family values? Oops, better sober up for church. What's the... Okay, so this was pre-transition that she... Sorry, I saw the name and I messed up. Um, so she wrote this pre-transition under her male name, her dead name. Something I don't like this third panel with the one black girl that looks the same as every other girl except she's got dark hair and dark skin. I don't like that. Okay, what's the next
They
one?
got a restraint.
Okay, I've got a tree. Oh, I don't like this drawing. What am I looking at? This looks like it was made in like. This looks so bad. It's clear. What did you make? Did she make it in Flash? What am I looking at? I was gonna say something, but I shan't. I've got a treat for you this week. Oh, I forgot. I forgot something. I forgot something so important. Oh no! Oh no, guys! I forgot something so important. Hold on a second, guys. Image. I forgot something. Here it is. Ah, yippee. Let's go and put that baby right there. Over this way. Perfect. No. Well. Okay, there we go. Perfect. All right, anyway. Got a treat for you this week. I'm going to the print and answer some letters from actual readers for the strip. Oh, dear Brianna, what attracted you to cartooning in the first place? That's a question I get a lot, actually. I think it was mostly the glamour, plus working at a newspaper means an obscene amount of money. What? Dear Brianna, how did you learn to draw? It's obviously you've never taken an art class. That's true. Actually, I've been doodling through all my classes in second grade. It's that hard work that makes my special styles possible. Hard work, huh? Dear Brianna, what's the worst thing about cartooning? I get a lot of angry letters from people who have inept opinions. People, these morons think every joke is about them. Some of you might think this joke is about you. This is a joke? I think that, like, the key part about jokes is that they're supposed to be funny, perhaps have a punchline. Dear Brianna, what's with the poor spelling? As I mentioned above, I spent most of elementary school doodling. This trend continues into college. Don't ask me anything about economics or management. Okay. Dear Brianna, what happens when you can't think of anything funny and you have a deadline? I usually slap something like this together or read on an older strip. Most people never notice. Fascinating. This was terrible. I can't believe I read that with my own eyes. I can't believe that there are neurons in my brain that for the rest of my life are dedicated to holding this information within the electrical current of my consciousness. I hate that this is going to be in my long-term memory recall forever. Even if I mostly forget it, a small part of my brain will have an electrical signal dedicated to this comic strip. And I'm furious.
In order to keep her away from Farley, but when they moved to Bishop, it no longer applied, and she was actually able to weasel back into working for the SMC. Here, we see several pieces of corroborating evidence with Brianna's own stories later. Things that are incredibly specific, like working with the Republican Party, which, again, Brianna would admit to in later interviews. So with these pieces of the puzzle, I feel pretty comfortable saying this did happen, and before transition, Brianna did go on a homophobic and racist rant. And right now you might say, well, that's not a lot of evidence. And you're right, I'm taking a little bit of this on faith, but having spent as much time as I have now studying Brianna, I can say this absolutely falls within the realm of her regular behavior and how she continues to act even today. So by the end of this video, I think you'll probably agree with me on this one. And plus, you'll be shocked to learn this kind of outburst and homophobia would come back later in her life. Additionally, there are pieces of art from her time in college when she was crafting this.
What is this? Okay. What is going on with her ankles? What is that? Thank you for the super chat page. Arrives 30 minutes late to the theaters. I bear refreshments as compensation. Welcome, welcome. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Don't try trick me with that 60s technology hoax sometimes. Snake is coming over tonight. We better hide all the chairs. What is... Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Holiday. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I know a little bit about Revolution 60 because I've been researching it. It is the same girl. Because this character's name is Holiday. Did she just put the Evangelion's, like, spine thingies, like little headpieces onto this character's head? This looks so ass, by the way. I am really not looking forward to playing it. Yeah. That's it. That's the same. It's the same character. It didn't work in her stupid slice of life fan. Oh my god, this is reminding me so much of another person that who shall not be named. Oh boy. It's the same character. Also, what do you mean? What do you mean hide all the chairs? What does that fucking mean?
Comic strip called Election Eve that, while made under her dead name, the same name cited in the forum gossip, is in the same style and even shares similar designs with Revolution 60, Brianna's eventual sole video game creative credit, particularly the characters Holiday and Minuet, who are recurring through much of Brianna's creative work. These comics and the artistic similarities further cement Brianna as the same person mentioned in the forum posts. Mind you, these posts were idle.
Okay, we already read that. We're good.
Gossip years before Brianna became any kind of notable political or game industry figure. Socially Unconscious and Election Eve aren't really notable except for how poorly they were received.
I hate that. What is this text styled? It looks like they tried. It looks like she tried to make a sexy version of Cardcaptor Sakura, and it doesn't work.
With the flat jokes often depicting offensive stereotypes and not making much sense, at least according to the mail-in section of the college newspaper. Thanks to Andrea James at Transgender Map for help with these sources, by the way. And
Smart-mouth goddess with a princess complex and her very own tiara. Boozy, spaced-out sorority girl that brings new meaning to virtual reality. A busty journalist on the verge of a nervous breakdown because of her Brea and Allison. And the way she figures someone has to rule the world, it might as well be her. They're all the same! They're all the same. They have the same characterization, and they're so shallow, and it's like fueled by horniness. What the hell? Where am I? Somebody come pick me up. My mom said I had to go home. Ah! Yeah, you know what? Looking at people like this, it really makes you feel confident in your own art skills. This girl ran for senator. She tried to be a senator.
speaking of her brief comic strip writer stint, I can't really talk about this era of Brianna without acknowledging her probably made-up girlfriend, Lauren Malovey, in 2001. During her time with Socially Unconscious, Brianna then
Okay. I'm gonna ask you guys a serious question because I didn't think this is what I was getting myself into. I need you guys to be honest with me because I can't fucking do this again. Because if this is what's going on, I need to stop this here tonight. Maybe I have to stop it on Thursday because I am really curious about that game. Is Brianna Wu just a more successful Lily Orchard? Is that what's going on right now? Because that's what it feels like. And if that's what's happening, I need to get the fuck out of here. I can't do this again. I can't do it again. I can't do this. I just wanted to be like, oh my god. Thank you for the super chat. Looks like she learned everything from those how to draw manga books. Yeah. There's no incest this time. Thank fucking god. Red alert, eject. I'm in too deep now. I need to at least... Okay, I need to get through this video, and I need to play the game, and that's it. That is it. I'm not looking at anything else, just this video and the fucking game, and that's all I want. That's all I'm doing, and if I do anything else, hit me with a very big rock. Truly, I am just curious about the game, and I want some backstory. And I thought, yeah, I should probably hear about this from another trans person instead of the crazy ones. I can't do this. And this is Lily Orchard too. Electric Boogaloo. I can't do it again. I've got tequila in the fridge. If it gets too rough for me, I have tequila in the fridge. I can't do this again. I just wanted to know about the stupid shitty game and who made it. That's all I wanted to know. Okay, we're playing.
Transition was writing her comic Election Eve with Milovi, apparently the primary artist. Now, the art style is already pretty distinctive and similar to Brianna's own, so keep that in mind. Milovi never posted a picture of herself, but blog posts exist on the socially unconscious.
It's just Tara Callie. It's Tara Callie. My girlfriend Tara Callie from California / Canada.
Website claiming she and Brianna were partners and in love. Curiously, there are posts under Milovi's name like product reviews circa 2004. The way it's written is notably similar to Brianna's own assertive and casually abrasive style.
But I think a lot of trans people do that, where they test out a persona that is the boy version of them or the girl version of them. I did too. I never pretended that, like, I knew them or that we were dating. But I'd, like, poke around in places that I frequented as a boy version of myself. I just pretend... But see, I was like, yeah, but if I acknowledge my other account, it's gonna be suspicious. So I just pretended it was, like, a completely separate account. But it was perfect. I think it's perfectly normal for trans people to do that, to have, like, I had 2 Facebook profiles forever. So that's pretty common, I think. Like, my boy Facebook profile, dates back to way before I came out. So, like, that doesn't surprise me. But anyway.
And internet sleuths would later discover the only address from anyone named Lauren Milovi matched the same house as a pre-transition Brianna. Milovi is, as it turns out, also a Bond girl's last name, Cara Milovi from the 1987 film The Living Daylights. You'll notice that Brianna is a big fan of spy fiction, and you can see it in her art of women with all the updos and the go-go boots and bright, garish, skin-tight suits. It's like Austin Powers' Silent Hill. Then there's the evidence via Socially Unconscious's own website that Brianna publicly advertised looking for female models, citing Lauren being camera shy. Perhaps most damning is that after Socially Conscious Productions was shut down, Lauren Milovi seems to have almost entirely disappeared, which, as we would soon see, coincided with Brianna's transition. Now, I don't like speculating at what I can't prove, but as a trans person, I think this feels familiar to how a lot of people might try exploring their own gender behind the anonymity of the internet. I honestly don't care if Brianna made up an entire internet girlfriend to explore ideas around femininity and gender expression, which is kind of what it looks like happened here. Everyone's done internet cringe when they were younger, nobody was exploited and nobody was hurt by this, so I don't really care. And you might ask yourself, then why bring this up, especially when there's only anecdotal evidence to go on. Isn't it possible this Lauren Milovi just so happened to live at the same place, write similarly, draw similarly, and act similarly to Brianna and then disappeared before Brianna transitioned? Come on. It is technically possible that there is someone named Lauren Milovi out there, but what makes Lauren notable, however, is how it's not the only time there would be compelling evidence that Brianna Wu would craft an identity or person on the internet to support her.
Exactly. See, the difference with this is that this is sock puppeting. And in my opinion, if somebody's sock puppet once, they'll do it again. And that's very different from having alts. Having an alt is just like, oh, I'm just, I'm going to make an account on this website and it's me except it's a boy. Or it's me except it's a girl. And I'm not going to tell anybody that I'm the same person, so I can kind of feel out what it's like to be a girl or a boy. That's super common. But if you start talking and interacting with yourself as if you know that person and using that to kind of like socially manipulate the people around you, which seems to be what Brianna was doing with this Lauren Malovey person, then you've basically, for me, my trust is out the window. At that point, it's like, you'll sock puppet if it suits you. You're capable of that. You're willing to come up with that much of a lie, and you have the dedication to craft another person to back yourself up. I'm repeating myself. Okay. All right, let's go.
So like most
I'll
things
be
in the
quiet.
Story, we're going to come back to this later. Going back
Sorry,
to
Adrian, thank you for the super chat.
Money from her parents to start. You may have noticed I mentioned she went to Millsaps and then referred to her going to Ole Miss. That's not an accident, because she was at Millsaps before Ole Miss, and it's here she would put out her first comics. A lot of stories from Brianna's time in college are hard to verify, not just because she hadn't transitioned yet, but because she constantly either lies or omits details about this time in her life publicly, despite some details leaking through in various interviews. And after internet weirdos on Kiwi Farms and 4chan began targeting her during Gamergate, she's gone to extensive lengths to try and bury certain aspects of her past, such as the aforementioned racist outburst. But one thing is for certain: she came from a rich-ass conservative family who helped her through every difficulty in her early life, from rehab to funding her own startup when she was 19 years old. From a story titled, quote, "Don't Mess with Brianna Wu," posted to Fiction Mania in 2006, she also mentions being able to finish laser hair removal just 6 months into her transition, something that is prohibitively expensive for many trans women even today.
Wow.
I don't need to even speculate that growing up rich affected Brianna, because she's been open about it, saying in 2014 that her millionaire parents affected her upbringing and outlook on the world. She was given $200,000 to start an animation studio that eventually dissolved before producing any kind of product. If the aforementioned ad for a model to pose as Lauren Malovey is any indication, the studio's ambitions were to turn Election Eve into a movie, and were apparently working on a sequel novel before there was anything even released aside from the comic strip itself. The level of exuberant, blind, naive ambition would become another commonality in Brianna's saga. But that doesn't mean that Brianna didn't have something to show for her time in art, animation, and college. She has a long history of art with a, let's say, distinctive style.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to specifically make fun of anybody's art here. Art isn't easy.
Oh yeah, I'll do that for you, Dead Domain. Don't worry, girl. I got you. I'll make fun of the art. It's piss. It sucks. It looks like strippers in space, and it's giving like, yeah. It's not good. It's giving I learned how to draw manga from Learn How to Draw Manga. But anyway.
Some things about Brianna's art interesting, particularly how she draws and very explicitly fetishizes women's bodies.
Yes.
And by interesting, I mean, it's like I can tell a lot about a person and how she sees the world from it. Like that Jake Gyllenhaal character in the one movie he did with Wolverine. You know the one. Much of her art depicts busty, rail-thin, leggy women, often in skin-tight or very little to no clothing. This is another trend in her work over the last 20 years. There's very little variation in the body types of women, or for that matter, the style in which they are written. Almost all of her characters are generically headstrong women, independent badasses who feel rooted in an outdated brand of Obama-era girl boss feminism. Again, aesthetically, there are a lot of overlaps we can see with Brianna's inspirations, like pulpy spy fiction, specific anime and manga, Final Fantasy, and more. And yes, of course, we have to talk about the MLK Terminator with the KKK Ninja Girls. There's just no other way to describe it. This piece was apparently the cover for...
Oh, we've got like a better view of it now. Why did you draw sexy KKK girls? Brianna, what are you doing?
crossed genres and was accompanied by this blurb from her husband Frank Wu in 2009. Quote, Brianna went to University of Mississippi, where a famous race riot took place. Thus the building is the Lyceum, where you can still see the bullet holes in the columns. As one of the lone liberals on campus, Bree wanted to do her own commentary on it. So, we see Martin Luther King with a rocket, but it's okay because he's a Terminator. And we also see KKK members, but they're all sexy ninja girls in skimpy white outfits. And now that MLK is free at last from his fleshy shell, he's going to kick their butts. 60s girls in go-go boots and jetpacks fight alongside. Remember when I said she lacked political instincts, despite apparently studying political science? I'd like to present to the court Exhibit A. If I thought Brianna had any real understanding of political struggle, let alone MLK and his ideas around reactionary politics, intersectional movements, or really anything about civil rights,
I don't even know
I'd
what to
say it would
say.
be disrespectful to slather the imagery of the civil rights movement in her.
I don't even know what to say at this point. I wasn't muted, Milena. I was stunned. I wasn't muted. That wasn't a tech issue. That was me being, like shell-shocked. I don't know. I don't even know what to say. I'm dumbfounded.
Knockoff manga, pin-up fetish art style. But I don't want to give her that credit for understanding those things to begin with. As seen in even more recent tweets, her understanding of racism, let alone civil rights struggles, are constantly shown.
That's too much, man. This is too much, man. Yeah, just let the. Oh my god. We let the KKK come to. God. Oh my fuck.
To be
She ran for office. She ran for office. And she says things like this, and she ran for office. Oh my god.
thin at best and virtually non-existent at worst. Now, we will talk more about Brianna's artistic output when we get to Revolution 60 and her stab at game development, but having touched
I Crib, did you just die and come back for us? I did something. Something happened. There was process that happened to me. See, yes, I am unversed in Wu. I know about her a little bit, and she annoys me in the modern day, and I haven't heard her name since Gamergate until about 2024. And, like, this is giving me... This is like a cognito hazard. Yeah, somebody like, hey, if I put some fucking rope on my Amazon wish list, will you guys get it for me? Oh my god. Yes, I know, Cinder, I know that it's not far off from what politicians are saying nowadays, but I can't.
on her various artistic exploits, I feel I need to examine Brianna's constant character self-inserts. These depictions of women aren't just something that she fetishizes, but
It is Lily Orchard too. It's Lily Orchard again.
it's also how she, I believe, to at least some extent,
Oh my god.
sees herself. Normally, I think
Do you think Lily Orchard will ever run for office? No, I can't think that. No, I don't want to bring that evil into the world. No. Nope.
calling things self-inserts is hack-level internet criticism. When it's leveled at game developers, it's almost always not true. For example, incidental passing similarities are bound to happen in art as an extension of the creator's inspirations and personality. But in Brianna's case, there's a lot of evidence that the characters she makes aren't just representations of her interests, but how she sees herself going through the world. Remember when I talked at the beginning about how Brianna says trans women enjoy being objectified? When I first heard that, it immediately felt out of touch with the reality of survival sex work.
Yes.
But the more I've learned about Brianna, the more it makes sense. She doesn't consider the perspective of others, but she does fetishize femininity herself. And it's not just femininity, but a specific brand of headstrong anime protagonist coolness. I have no other way to describe it, honestly. As an example, here's an article she would write during Gamergate. Just listen to how she describes herself and pay attention to the fixation she has on sports motorcycles, a recurring motif for many of the scantily clad women in her art. This section is a little long, but bear with me because this bit, written by Brianna herself, is such a valuable insight with how she sees herself and goes through the world, and more importantly, how that just changes depending on her whims. Quote, I'm late for a programming meeting with Maria. I don't have time to be stuck in Boston traffic. So instead of grabbing my car keys, I don black, skin-tight leather armor and leap onto my motorcycle. It's a 2009 Honda in racing red, something straight out of Akira. I've leaned into highway turns at 80 miles an hour feeling nothing but speed, the air whipping all around me, and my thighs gripping a 212-degree engine for dear life. My emotional connection to this 410 pounds of fuel and metal is intense. Idling at a red light, I see a woman waiting to cross. She has my figure and looks to be my age. The frazzled look of motherhood is about her, disheveled hair and perpetual distraction. She's hunched over to hold the hands of two kids so beautiful that my heart gives an involuntary lurch, an instinct hardwired into my brain in ways I don't understand. It hits me hard as if this is an alternate reality version of myself crossing the street, a Brianna that had made drastically different choices. The woman notices me. Look at the girl on the motorcycle, she says to her children. Our eyes meet. I recognize my gray-blue shade in her eyes. I was adopted and had planned to do the same, but recently I've changed my mind. I wonder for the billionth time if the right decision is to concentrate on my job. I'm certain that if I had children, I would be failing at my job. I've hit my 30s, a period when it seems all of my friends suddenly have kids. That's a priority shift completely incompatible with goals. Startups require you to give it all or go home, routinely requiring long nights, longer weekends, and blood and toil. If you aren't willing to put in the hours, eager replacements are standing behind you. If I fail, the women I work with will all be out of their jobs. The light turns red. I release the clutch and twist the throttle, and my doppelganger and her children disappear in my wake.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Brianna. You also failed at that. So, like, what was all that for, I guess? I don't think she's a closet weeb. I think she's pretty open about that.
End quote. So we can pretty clearly see that anime influences seeping into Brianna's perception of herself and the real world around her. Her long-running fixation with sport motorcycles apparently tying into it, but don't miss out the vaguely fetishized description of her in skin-tight leather wrapping her thighs around an engine with an intense connection to the fuel and metal. This isn't written tongue-in-cheek, by the way. This is meant to be a soft wrapping her thighs around an engine with an intense connection to the fuel and metal.
I'm stun locked again. Because that's this thing. Which is women's lib, but it was like very heavily tied to black women. Here's another with fingernail polish. I don't know how I feel about that. Yeah, here. This is the original symbol, I think. Ah. Ladies wear nail polish. Exactly.
This isn't written tongue-in-cheek, by the way. This is meant to be a somber reflection of a place and time in her life as a woman. I don't think this ever happened, by the way. I think it's another example of Brianna sensationalizing her life, something we are going to see much more of. She likes to craft this kind of elaborate narrative about something passively happening to her that also just coincidentally works to sum up whatever grand argument she's trying to make in whatever piece she's writing. And yet it's so ephemeral that there's no way to verify it actually happened. She just be saying shit sometimes. If you're familiar with Brianna's modern positions on being trans and trans rights, this also might seem at odds with what she says here. Nowadays, Brianna will go out of her way to say some dumb shit like, trans women are just boys that need hormones or we will break. And these arguments of hers are an effort to court favor with TERFs and broadly anti-trans or gender-critical commentators, mostly conservative. She now argues against trans people, quote, invading women's spaces, and argues in favor of essentially seeing trans women as fetishistic men, promoting no shortage of ideas that provably put queer people and trans people in danger. And she does all of this unironically, despite the fact that, as you can see here, she spent several years, over a decade in fact, depicting herself as a biological woman and using that pretense to position herself as a voice on women's issues.
I think I pass reasonably well, but when I go to the gym, I shower at home just because if someone can tell I'm trans, I don't want to upset them. I think women deserve the right to say, no, we don't feel comfortable with you in our space. So I would say to my sisters out there, I understand that it can be dehumanizing the way that we're treated sometimes. The way that TERFs talk to us is just, it's brutal. It is cruel. It is so mean, but we will get so much further with getting goodwill from the public, with humility and grace and trying to get people to buy in and for them to see our humanity than we will by forcing them.
In pieces like...
So, yeah, didn't she pretend to be cis? Like, wasn't that like a big thing? Like, she pretended she wasn't trans for a long time. And then when she only was outwardly, like, presenting as, like, she only was admitting to being trans for a very short time before turning absolutely regressive. Right? Is that timeline about right? Oh, Lord. Okay, cool.
Like this and myriad Gamergate interviews and articles she would write, she never discussed her status as a trans woman.
Hold on. Excuse me, I had to sneeze and it was really gross. Also, did she write her own Wikipedia? Did she write her own Wikipedia article? Is another question that I have. Oh, you're good, Adrian. Don't worry.
Only depicting herself as someone who's always been a biological woman. Could this be because at each point in time, depicting herself a certain way was, at least in her mind, guaranteed to get her maybe a little bit more attention? For example, depicting herself as a cis woman during the perils of Gamergate, and now coming forward as a trans woman to lend credibility to her political arguments against other trans people. I'll let you decide as we dig more into Brianna and specifically her long history of opportunism. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We have a lot more to talk about before we get to Brianna's time in Gamergate and the events that would give her the bigger spotlight she has always been chasing. Also notable for Brianna pre-Gamergate was her time spent on Susan's Place, where she was a moderator. I had no idea what this place even was before sifting through Brianna's past, but apparently it was a notorious forum that caters primarily to an incredibly outdated view of trans people, in particular
no.
and trans identities as a disorder.
Not the trans meds.
Brianna was apparently banned from the forum in 2007 after some kind of incident that was deemed unbecoming a moderator, and it appears the forum manager even said, quote, I had hoped to allow her to leave with whatever dignity she could, but apparently that isn't going to be allowed to happen. Though I couldn't tell what incident had occurred here. So, much like stories of her in college, we can see Brianna has a history of being abrasive and confrontational to anyone who even peacefully speaks out against her. It's actually kind of funny, half of Brianna's past wouldn't be identifiable as being her if it wasn't for the way she very specifically reacts to other people in criticism.
This is familiar. Why is this so familiar? I'm gonna fucking kill myself. I hate this. In Minecraft. In Minecraft. It's fucking. I can't do. I can't do this. Ah! Uh, can't do it again. I 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 can't do this again.
We will see much more of this abrasive, commanding tone in the future, so by the end of this video, you'll definitely recognize her distinctive style of online interaction, which is to basically act like an authority figure on any given subject and belittle anyone who might challenge her, regardless of her actually being qualified in what...
Yeah, what is with self-contradictory people like this? Is it self-hate, or is it I'm the only one who's allowed to be trans? I feel like it's like, I have to be special and unique and the only one, because then it's like, oh, I really actually am. I think it's a weird thing dysphoria does to your brain, where you're like, okay, but I actually am a woman trapped in a man's body. I literally am that. And then somebody's like, I'm trans too. I get, and it's like, no, you don't get it. I am actually a woman trapped in a man's body. That's what I actually am. Whatever you are, I look at you and I see myself and I don't like it. No, that's not who I am. I am a woman trapped in a man's body. Like, that's what it is, you know? Oh my god, I can't do this. Rip self-soothing with Steven Universe music. But it's too familiar.
what she's saying, because most of the time she's not. Also, during her time on Susan's Place, she spoke often about how Christians were evil and oppressive, an understandable opinion because at the time she'd likely been cut off from her family and was by this point, I think, living with her husband, Frank Wu. It's also worth bringing up the time she talked about having no sympathy for any detrans people. There are several other commonalities between Brianna in 2007 and her attitudes now. For example, her insistence on using the word transsexual other than transgender, which might just be a time she was in type of thing. I also want to take a little detour to go talk about her live journal entries from around these times, which also...
I mean, for the record, I'm gonna have to push back against Dead Domain a little bit here. Don't be weird about the term transsexual. I call myself transsexual sometimes. I think it's fine. It's a fine term. Usually when people used it back in the day, transsexual specifically meant somebody who did or was intending to get sex reassignment surgery. Whereas transgender was the umbrella term, where when you were like transsexual, it's like, no, I am going to make, I am getting a sex change, or I did get a sex change. And it wasn't really to invalidate anybody, it was more to be specific about the experience. And I think anybody, even if you aren't getting a sexual reassignment surgery, I think you should be able to call yourself whatever you want. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that term. But anyway. Because transgender is that I'm transitioning my gender. Transsexual, you're still transgender, but you're also transitioning your sex, was the idea. But anyway. As soon as I think I'm out, they pull me back in. Thank you for the super chat page. I appreciate you.
Detail her, I'm gonna say, frankly, fucking unhinged ideas on politics. Just listen to this shit. Quote, let me preface this blog by saying that I think gay rights are the preeminent moral issue of our time, the modern equivalent of slavery. It's one of the top 3 issues I vote on, and I fully intend to go demonstrate in Denver's Gay Pride Parade in 2 weeks. It bothers me deeply that 1/10 of the population are treated like second-class citizens. That said, I think it's an error to see women's issues and gay issues as synonymous. I don't especially feel that gays are allies when it comes to women. I think we usually get along well, but
It's funny. Okay. Oh my god, she's doing it again. She's throwing trans gay people under the bus, pretending she's a cisgender woman. And the whole getting offended by drag queens. Okay. See, that's not what being a drag queen is about. It's... Yeah, well, I'm not gonna get into that right now.
I've occasionally felt that gays see us primarily as competition for the penis. When I... Okay, no, serious. Okay. When I watch drag queens, I can't help but feel insulted, as if that offensive cartoon is what they think feminine truth is. There are so many issues women have that gay men never have to think about, or increased healthcare costs, equal pay issues, access to reproductive healthcare, and the threat of rape and violence. Concordantly, there are many gay issues that don't affect me. I've never had to worry that society didn't approve of my sexuality or marriage rights. Lots to unpack here. As I mentioned, we see her
there's a
already
lot to
picking herself
unpack there.
as a cis woman, not a trans woman. She's concocted this bizarre framework where gay men resent women as competition for penis, and then proceeds to say drag is a offensive cartoon that gay men think feminine truth is. That despite her actually making literal cartoon representations of how she saw femininity. Even in the previously mentioned 2006 fiction.
Yeah, like all of her little cartoon characters are basically like little drag queens, right?
Mania post where she recounts her first 6 months of transition, she essentializes femininity to what she saw as feminine traits she had pre-transition, like making food for an ungrateful partner, or defining profanity in speech as a masculine trait. Quote, generally speaking, girls are nicer and much more cooperative. I find myself obsessed with the importance of always being nice to people, even people I disrespect. Part of female communication is coming to consensus rather than being dominant. This comes second nature with estrogen. Also, estrogen makes you live in your own world. I sometimes find myself oblivious to my immediate surroundings, concentrating on something as insignificant as a hair on my desk. Estrogen also makes me more reticent to say what I'm thinking because I understand more deeply how important it is to get along.
My God. I just realized what's happening. Okay, I need to go get my tea. I recognize I just put the pieces together and I realized what happened. And I understand what's going on. I just put the pieces together. Brianna Wu has a bimbofication fetish. That's what's happening. Oh my God. No, it's she's allowed the bimbofication fetish to overwrite gender identity to the point. Oh my God. Okay, I'm gonna Google something, but I'm gonna hide that in case something awful comes up. I hate this. I'm about to show you something, and I'm so sorry, chat. You'll find ones that start as male and gradually turn female. But that's what's going on with Brianna. It makes sense with the art and the way she talks about estrogen. But, like, I can't concentrate on anything when I'm on estrogen. Like, fuck off. Girl, what the fuck? Yeah, I feel like I'm turning into a fucking bimbo right now listening to this. Okay.
And later in that same Fiction Mania post, quote, "And although I might dismiss it, being a girl is a lot of fun. Makeup, nails, fashion, and exercise were all things I took to easily. It's fun to wear skirts and to have long hair, but it's also important to remember that's not what being a woman is about. It's also about the standards you hold yourself to. It's about your capacity to be weak when it would be easier to be strong." What the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck, Brianna? Remember the MLK art and what I said, how she doesn't understand intersectionality and political organizations and movements? This is a lot like that in a lot of ways. Throughout her life, Brianna has seemed terminally unable to consider the struggles of others if they happen to coincide with her own. Instead of understanding political movements and structures as overlapping Venn diagrams of who is affected by what in different ways, she just seemingly wants her own little well-defined circle to claim as her own, regardless of if it pushes anybody else out. This is something she currently loves to do with non-binary folks and basically anyone she doesn't see as really trans. Again, this is we got a long ways to go. So it's safe to say, as far back as even the mid-aughts, Brianna was regarded as odd, abrasive, and even weird to and about other trans and queer people. Now, I don't want to say Brianna still thinks this reductively about gender because, in fairness, that was 20 years ago, but I bring it up because I think it colors in some of the shade she approaches gender and identity in for later. On Susan's Place, we can, for example, go back and see her being real shitty about other trans people, essentially saying she doesn't want to hang out with other trans people because why would you hang out with trans women if you see yourself as a woman? Which is amazingly stupid logic, because if you see yourself as a trans woman, as a woman, you shouldn't have a problem hanging out with any kind of women, you fucking dork. Even in places where she should be seeking community and understanding. Like with other trans or gay people, she seems to have no interest in anything but setting herself apart. I wonder if that'll come back. It will. It will. But what I find most interesting here is how similar some...
Hello? Here's my audio. There we go.
It's no surprise, right, that she would still be an abrasive, selfish person who doesn't consider the lives and existences of others, but that's not the part I find interesting. What I find interesting is how she would change her opinions in the coming years, being broadly supportive of a wider queer community. Like this Reddit post where she still claims to support non-binary people and calls them transgender. So either she changed her opinions between her early transition and then changed them back again, or she was simply aligning herself with what was then broadly progressive positions at the time. That time being when she was in the spotlight for Gamergate, and then her political aspirations right after that. I mean, what are the odds she would change her opinions and or how she depicts herself multiple times in ways that would very specifically give her more support? But this was in 2015, slightly after Gamergate, so I won't get too far ahead of myself. Let's jump right into Brianna and Gamergate.
Oh boy, let's go. I was excited about this part.
Oh, hey there, Kickstarters. I'm four-time Hugo Award winner, Frank Wu. For the last 3 years, we've been working on the video game Revolution 60, and here to tell you more is anime legend Amanda Winley.
This is it.
If we're quiet, I think we can sneak past them. With Revolution 60, the story is yours to tell.
In 2007, Brianna met Frank Wu, who would marry her. In 2009, she'd claimed she had a grad degree she didn't have. In 2010, her fairly wealthy husband would then fund Brianna's endeavor in gaming, releasing a game in 2014 called Revolution 60. So, let's talk about Revolution 60. Brianna's sole gaming credit might feel familiar if you remember the art I showed off earlier in the video, and that's because several of the characters are straight up recycled from Election Eve and her other art, Holiday and Minuet being chief among them. Now, apparently, if you can believe such a thing, Brianna wasn't very fun to work with, as noted by this former employee of Brianna's studio, Giant Space Cat, ending the thread with the observation that Frank was the only one seen at the game's convention booth because Brianna was too busy with interviews. She's also been called out on social media before by other workers, and when I reached out to former development teammates to see if they had anything to say, no one responded except for one who simply said, "I don't talk about Brianna anymore, good luck." Now, Revolution 60 was a iOS release in 2014 with a Steam release slated that was delayed by 2 years to September 2016. These delays would result in some Kickstarter and Patreon backers being unsatisfied when the game did release and was still basically the same, and not very good, at least judging by the user scores on Steam. It's harder to go by the game's few professional reviews because there's evidence that either Brianna or her husband Frank Wu had close personal relationships and friendships with several journalists who reviewed the game. Now, regardless of any possible positive reviews, the game's overall reception would be middling at best, and most of the user reviews skewed negative on both iOS and the Steam release. Because Brianna was a target of Gamergate, it's hard to say how much of the game's criticism is legitimate, or just angry trolling, but by and large, it seems like the early reviews of the game on iOS praised the game's ambition, but overall range from middling to negative, a sentiment shared by Steam reviews citing game-breaking bugs and technical issues. If there's one thing this game is remembered for, it's probably the art style, which is a 3D adaptation of Wu's comics years earlier in that it is almost entirely a cast of spindly, doll-like women. Notably, several character designs, like the one featured in this poster, would be eventually changed, and in interviews, Brianna would cite feedback from other women specifically for shifting her character design ethos, which may explain the changes. Again, it sure seems like Brianna's definition of strong femininity is like fetish gear.
These are... So on the left is a character from Soul Calibur 5, and on the right is your character from Revolution 60.
Absolutely.
And you know, to the superficial observer, these might look the same.
They might. I think it's all about intent. You know, I created these character models myself, and well, at least I didn't design. But you know, so the difference is like Vanessa and Holiday both have very skin-tight outfits. But the difference to me is when I played Piano 3, I saw someone I could imagine myself as. Yeah, she's cool.
See, that's what I was thinking when I saw this. Is like, this reminds me of PN03. Which, if Revolution 60 is bad, I might end up just playing PN03, which it was, you know, I have mixed feelings about PN03. It's a third-person shooter game, and you stare at her ass the whole time, at Vanessa's ass the whole time. But it's intriguing enough. The story's fine, the gameplay is fine. So the fact that she based it off of PN03... yeah, no, I've never heard anybody else talk about that game, but I've been meaning to stream it for a while. Because I think it's interesting in terms of games, even if it is a little bit you know, look, it's a girl's butt and she's shooting guns.
Badass. She's
Yeah,
prolific.
yeah.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
And the difference is all about empowerment and intent.
Within a few weeks of release, Revolution 60 didn't reach further than the top 1,000 downloads for iPhone, despite being a free download that included the demo and a purchase that unlocked the rest of the full game. Now again, this video isn't about examining Brianna's creative work and tearing it apart. Aside from examining commonalities between this and her early work that support conclusions like the fabrication of Lauren Malovey, I don't really care to examine much in Revolution 60. It seems like a garish, uncoordinated genre blend that lines up with all of Brianna's previous work, blending her distinct influences in a way that never feels original or unique. But I do think it is telling that despite spending more than 4 years developing the game and several hundred thousands of estimated dollars, primarily funded by her husband Frank Wu, Revolution 60 was the end result. While Giant Space Cat as a studio did ship a product, the sheer amount of time and money expended echoed Brianna's first startup at 19 that wasted similarly exorbitant funds on her creative endeavors. Add to this little things in the game's design that just make me scratch my head, like all the female characters using the same character model, like all the characters apparently having 10,000 polys, which would be hysterically unoptimized for iOS at the time, and probably contributed to the numerous technical issues. Much of the soundtrack are royalty-free songs, tons of the assets are apparently just from Unreal Asset Packs and more. Again, most of this was found years ago by Internet Sleuths, so thank them for their work so I don't have to play this thing. Okay, but so she put out a middling game,
I'm looking forward to playing that. It's going to be a hot garbage. I hope my computer can handle it.
Successful, her time as a game developer didn't dissuade her from seeking a spotlight, using what she would sell as her expertise in the industry to spark conversations about being a woman in said industry, which was the real start of Brianna.
Okay, so just so that we're clear, the game that reminded me, it looked like the game that was like, this looks like a ripoff of this game, it's this. PN03. Again, I kind of like this game. And you've got this sexy character, but it still looks like she's wearing armor, I think. Whereas her characters look like they're wearing spandex. And this is what the character looks like on screen. And like, yes, her butt. Yes, everybody look at her butt. She has a nice butt. But it's not the same. You know? This is a sexy character in the years... yeah, this is a sexy character around the years that sex sells. That was what people were saying at the time. Sex sells. Oh, it's a Capcom game. And I have mixed feelings about that, but there's a difference between sex sells and this is a character with like a story and she looks like a real woman. Like, sexy as she is, she has fairly realistic proportions. She's not, like, she doesn't have exaggerated figures. Like, yes, maybe her poses and the outfits are a little ridiculous. But I wouldn't, it's realistic, it's, you know, it's not, but it's like, I feel like she took PN03 and Stripperella by Stan Lee and smashed them together. Here's another peek at the gameplay. That looks like it's like a re-rendered thing, because that looks really clean. This was on the GameCube, by the way. Some of the shots, like, this is the actual in-game on the GameCube, which is, you know, that's kind of impressive. The texture work was really well done. I think they did a lot of, like, painted, like, baked-in texture, so, like, the shading and the lighting was, like, painted into the texture, rather than it being, like, ray tracing or anything. So that's, like, one way that people were getting around limitations in the era. And like I said, like, I get it. There's problems with this. But, like, it's a decent game. It's an interesting character design. She looks unique enough. But whatever the fuck is going on with this is not... No. How dare you evoke... How dare you evoke PN03 with your bullshit? That is not the same. Anyway. She looks like a physically possible person, exactly. Oh, somebody sent me a meme and I have to look at it. I mean, like, the camera is absolutely ogling Vanessa. It is focused on her ass. It follows her ass. 100%. She even dances. She like wiggles her hips back and forth while she's shooting robots. Absolutely is ogling her ass, but her ass is a realistic ass.
Wu's story. For most people in the media sphere, the first time they heard about Wu was during Gamergate. And bear with me because there's so much random internet drama I've had to sort through with various factions, backstabs, inconsistencies, and perspectives. I've done my best to source and cite everything I say like I
Wu's main influence is Space Channel 5, apparently. Yeah.
always do. And having said that, I think it's safe to say Brianna Wu was the biggest opportunist on any side of Gamergate. Now, I don't have time to regurgitate the full timeline of everything and everyone associated, but for those who don't remember, Gamergate was a hate campaign leveled at Zoe Quinn and Anita Sarkeesian specifically. These two, and several others throughout the gaming industry, were targeted for various reasons, ranging from being vocal proponents of basic feminist theory about female game characters being too sexualized in the male gaze from Anita, to Zoe's controversy around a review for their game that kicked off the whole thing. If you want a truly in-depth and incisive look at the controversy, I highly recommend my friend Savvy Writes Books video on the subject, as she goes incredibly deep through the controversy, step by step, in a way I just don't have time to do here. The broad strokes are, while some people try to focus the movement on a nebulous idea of ethics and accountability in game journalism, for many people, Gamergate consisted of several harassment campaigns that made some women in the industry feel incredibly unsafe, and that was before Brianna Wu came into the picture. This article from The Guardian lays out some key points in the Gamergate timeline, such as bomb threats in March 2014 after an appearance by Anita Sarkeesian is announced, and the August 16th, 2014 blog post that alleges Zoe Quinn slept with someone at Kotaku for a positive review. And then just seemingly out of nowhere, after months of harassment concentrated on these two women, Brianna is mentioned on October 9th. You see, it's hard to talk about how Brianna fits into the picture between Anita and Zoe because she kind of doesn't. When Zoe and Anita were getting death threats and harassment, Brianna wasn't a well-known industry personality by any stretch. Despite what she'd say later about being one of the foremost women in tech, nobody really knew who she was. She was working on an indie phone game with very few eyes on it that didn't look very good, sporting Brianna's trademark lack of style and failing to generate any wider interest upon release.
Oh
Yet,
my
as a
God.
woman in the game industry, she took it upon herself to taunt and mock the Gamergate dorks she saw as basement-dwelling losers. In fact, she spent a lot of time and effort trying to goad people into engaging with her online. I don't want to make it sound like she didn't get any harassment, by the way, but there's overwhelming evidence that Brianna continually went out of her way to poke and prod the Gamergate forums, which you can see in these tweets from October 10th, 2014. You can see from these tweets, she starts the mocking around 10:30 a.m., and by 4:30 p.m., she announces the same day that 8chan has doxed her, and proceeds to talk about fleeing her home with her husband for fear of violence, particularly pointing to threats not from 8chan, but from a Twitter account, Chatter White Man. 3 days later, Brianna had an interview on the front page of Cosmopolitan. Soon enough, the list of her interviews would encompass the Boston Globe, Verge, Polygon, Huffington Post, VentureBeat, Daily Mail, BuzzFeed, Six Axis, and like a dozen others, all focused on the narrative that this Gamergate harassment campaign had driven a game developer from her home.
Interesting. Really kind of worked out well for her. She got huge in the news. Very interesting.
Now, this is anecdotal, but I spent hours Googling, gathering, and searching for interviews done by Anita, Brianna, and Zoe during this time. When it was active in 2014 and the year or so following, with rare exceptions like an appearance on a talk show from Anita, almost all of Quinn and Sarkeesian's interviews came years after the harassment campaigns that were threatening them and their families' lives. Brianna wasn't like that. For as much hate as they received and were targeted for, they very obviously wanted to try and continue living their lives, and were hesitant to be cast as some kind of ideological leaders on the front lines of Gamergate, despite not being given much of a choice. Compare, for example, Anita being quoted as saying it's frustrating to be known as a survivor of Gamergate, and then Brianna continuing to wear it as a badge of honor, to this day proudly touting her facing down the internet boards as an achievement.
I'm a former game developer, and I think most people know me from Gamergate. I remember during Gamergate, there was this expansionist thing that it wasn't enough to talk about the number of women.
I'm going to be honest, I didn't really hear about Brianna Wu in Gamergate. I heard about Zoe, I heard about Anita, and I heard about Natalie, like ContraPoints. I didn't really know, but I heard her name mentioned, but I wasn't really, as far as I know, a main target. It was Anita and Natalie and Zoe, right? I'm not, like, that, those are the three main people being targeted, right? Yeah, I do not know you from Gamergate.
They were hiring in the game
You
industry.
made that up.
Now we had to obliterate whiteness as something that we were featuring in games. I'm like, it's a little bit extreme, but we'll go along with it. So it was just one more step after another.
I'm not saying Brianna was never harassed or sent death threats.
I started hearing about Brianna Wu mostly, like, I recalled the name, and I was like, oh, I guess she was involved in Gamergate, but I didn't really start hearing her until she started being, like, a not violent, I shouldn't say violent when it's not true, because when she was outed as this horrible transphobe, and she started, like, just to take her foot and slowly slide the whole thing into her mouth.
But the speed with which she not only entered the conversation, but went from nobody knowing her name to apparently needing to flee her house for fear of her life, all the while she continued speaking up, is so wildly at odds with what you see from Zoe and Anita. That's just a fact. You can take it however you want. Oh, and let's not forget the fact that she talks shit about them later in some DMs. We'll talk about that more when we get to the long list of enemies she's made. This is, however, not at all at odds with Brianna's long-observed history of needing attention and shifting her aims and approaches to get that spotlight. This is another fact. Anita and Zoe, for whatever you might think about them, had their entire lives derailed by Gamergate. Brianna, however, suddenly got a platform, and I don't think it's a coincidence that this happened to be around the time she was still trying to get her eyes on her personal game project that floundered upon its initial iOS release. She seems to have used the opportunities afforded by the copious media appearances to not only drive home the idea that she was personally being persecuted and suffering from this movement, but also that independent and female game developers needed support, like she needed, for example, for the game that she was developing at the time, the game that nobody really cared about before she fled from her home. And the same game that would get reviews and press coverage from the same outlets that allowed Brianna to basically uncritically write whatever she wanted about Gamergate. The thing about Gamergate is, at the time, it neatly divided the industry into for or against. If you were perceived to have spoken out against harassment, you would be labeled an SJW cuck, and if you expressed any kind of apprehension about the overly flat criticism of people like Anita Sarkeesian, you would be easily lumped in with a bigoted hate mob doxing and attempting to ruin people's lives. When tensions run high, there's not a lot of room for nuance in these screaming matches between sides, despite the best efforts of plenty of people, and a number of commentators and internet historians have tried to approach the subject with that nuanced sense. It was the perfect environment for someone like Brianna to thrive in, where she could make whatever accusation she wanted, and when asked for proof, would simply accuse someone of being a Gamergater, like she did with notable not Gamergater David Pakman during a kind of now infamous interview.
The reason I chose to show what was going on with me was because the industry had chosen to stay silent. It was literally a choice for me to make my life, put it in danger, and to talk about this openly in the hope that would force the industry to finally look in the mirror and address.
I'm gonna say something, and this might be a little bit out of pocket. She looks crazy. I'm sorry. She looks nuts. I would be afraid of turning my back on her. I feel like she'd rip my throat out. It might be a little too out of pocket. She looks fucking crazy. She's the kind I would like cross to the other side of the street. She looks fucking crazy. She's the kind of person my mom would say. It's like, don't get out of there. Walk away. She's crazy. It's not worth it.
Some of these things.
Well, let's unpack that, because that's interesting to me. When you talk about the industry has remained silent, can you be a little more specific in the sense that, in spending quite a bit of time researching and preparing for this interview, it seemed without question that some of the threats you received through Twitter and publicized were reported ostensibly by those also claiming membership or allegiance to Gamergate. So are we really talking about the movement as the problem, or are we talking about a faction of those identifying with it as the problem? So the question about just this account, BROLOLZ, that's you, right? Is that a sock puppet account? Did you try to hide the fact that that was you? What's the story with that?
No. Oh my God, this is the most ridiculous thing on the entire planet. I'm very happy to address this.
Okay.
So a tactic that Gamergate has done quite a bit with Not Your Shield is they've created fake accounts from, like, say, a black feminist woman, and they put it out there, and they try to portray themselves this way. I created an account that's similar to, there have been other parody accounts, and the idea was this was a frat bro that was very for feminism. And it is just a silly joke. In fact, to make it very clear that it wasn't a sock puppet, because I was worried about people thinking I was doing that, I announced it on my Twitter. I just completely said it on the account. It is nothing more than a joke. And
so it's a satirical account. You never meant it.
It's a satirical account. If you don't understand it's a joke, it's because Gamergate doesn't understand the examples involved. I have to tell you, I feel like this is kind of a hit piece that you're doing on me right now, to be honest.
No, let's talk about that. Hold on a second.
Well, in a moment. I want to answer your question first. I feel like you're really putting me on trial here.
No, by no means. By no means. I think that's an unfair allegation.
Okay. To answer your question, he had some questions that were sent to me. I think it was about 20 to 30 of them. Some of them were ridiculously leading, just ridiculously leading. And I said to him, I think you're going to need to phrase these more neutrally, or I'm not going to be able to answer them. I also sent them to a friend of mine, Glenn Fleischman, who is a very famous journalist, a very, very, very famous, well-regarded journalist, writes for The Economist. And he actually just laughed at the questions because he didn't find them ethical.
That's perfectly fair. Listen, last thing, let's address your allegation that this is a hit piece.
Sure.
The way that I take particular issue with, I have absolutely no horse in this race. When I announced I was going to be interviewing you, I received a deluge of emails saying the fact that I was interviewing you alone and not someone in opposition to you was evidence that I was in the tank for the other side. And of course, I think you would disagree with that. All I'm doing is I spent many hours researching, and I don't want to be accused of not asking you the questions that others believe should absolutely be asked. I've not cut you off. I've presented you with a fair opportunity to answer every single claim, and I hope to have someone on with an opposing view next week or the week after you, and they will be asked all of the same tough questions.
Guys, you missed some stuff, Anthony. I'm going through it. Oh no, it's asking me to back up my points.
That you would want asked. So I take very significant issue with the allegation that this is in any way a hit piece. I have absolutely no preconceived notion of what right and wrong is on this particular issue. I'm open to hearing both sides, and I'm merely doing my job as a journalist.
Oh, yeah. Sure. I would say, yeah, that's fine if you're going to monologue.
I'm sorry, if I'm going to monologue? Brianna, you know, you're breaking up. I don't know if you have a good connection. We got cut off. All we heard before you got interrupted was if I want to monologue.
You just told me, you gave me a long monologue about why you don't feel that this was an aggressive hit piece. Why would
because you accused him, you crazy fuck.
say to you is this has been, you've asked me like one question to present my side, and then you've asked me some very, very aggressive questions, you know, questioning my credibility.
I am getting secondhand embarrassment. This is rough. I'm only calling her crazy because the look in her eyes gives me the heebie-jeebies. I don't like it. I don't like it. I feel like she'd rip my throat out. Yeah, this is an interview. What are you doing? Present yourself.
And I feel like most of what you've asked here has been very aggressive. I'm happy to answer that. I try to answer these as aggressively as possible, but I wish we could spend as much time talking about the issues at hand rather than the controversy that Gamergate is trying to, you know, frankly.
But this is an interview, not a documentary, girl.
Mud my reputation over.
This kind of reaction from Brianna is another staple, even against Kickstarter backers and Patreon subs who would question her later. She'd simply call them Gamergate supporters or abusers. I want to say that the divide...
I can't do this again, guys. I can't do this again. I can't do this again.
Between people from that time and the obvious agendas.
Oh my god, I
can't.
can't.
Is incredibly difficult because trying to find information on Brianna Wu or any of the other targets will bring up endless piles of assholes referring to women as subhumans and SJWs. But on the less extreme fringes, there were still plenty of people who kept tabs on the inconsistencies in Brianna's story, which isn't easy because there are so many. Suffice to say, this video took a lot of digging. Like this Reddit thread where they note that they rarely saw people comment harassment on Brianna's Twitter despite her claiming. And that, despite claiming to have fled her home, Brianna was very clearly doing interviews, or at least appearing to, from her home soon after having fled. But as we can see from some of these interviews, the image of someone being forced to flee from her home by Gamergate is a shocking and compelling one. That sensationalism is another aspect of Brianna's story that has remained steadfast. Yet, like her stories about college, having degrees, about being a crime reporter, doesn't really hold up to much scrutiny. For example, there are several consistency issues with the way she tells the story of her being forced to flee, most notably elements from the interviews and articles she wrote within days of the doxing being inconsistent with the way she would tell the same story months later, or some elements being seemingly missing, like the idea she had been getting harassment for months leading up to the tweets, eventually just being simplified to the tweets being the lone catalyst for the exodus. If you can feel the creeping sensation of something just being off about Brianna's story, don't worry, plenty of other people noticed, because even back then she'd be caught lying and attempting to bait harassment towards herself personally. Like this infamous post from her Steam forum account where she refers to herself in third person as a notable feminist and is very clearly trying to goad people into talking shit about her. Notable feminist, by the way, doing some real heavy lifting here. While forum posts and some articles did show Brianna's interest in progressive feminism and women's rights and representation issues, she wasn't particularly notable at this time for being a feminist, any more than she was notable ever for being an artist or a journalist. What am I saying? She still sells herself as all of these things, no matter how much she actually knows about any of this. I'm surprised at this point she doesn't call herself a chef because she made a TV dinner once and didn't burn the brownie. She likes...
Okay. I'll be nice. I'll be nice. I'll be good.
To, let's say, stretch the truth, if that wasn't obvious by now. For example, like how she would depict threats against her life, even when the same threats had long been revealed to be jokes. After an obvious online troll, Jace Connors went on several tirades trying to challenge Brianna to a street race. Brianna continued to claim he was threatening her life. It would later be revealed that Jace was merely a troll character being played by comedian Jan Rankowski as an elaborate, absurdist bit.
God. I want to skip ahead a little bit. So we get it, she was a troll during Gamergate. Let's get to another interview.
Okay, by Clue, but, you know. Tron references aside, there's still no real evidence Natalie O'Brien ever worked at Giant Space Cat. Even at the time, she wasn't featured in any of the photos posted.
Okay,
To the studio, would have been one of, if not the only employee to not have any social media presence, despite apparently being specifically hired as a social media consultant to, according to Brianna, work full-time to run interference for the harassment and death threats Brianna was attracting. This lack of any representation and most notably no photographic evidence of any kind should ring familiar to Lauren Malovies. So with all this information at your disposal, draw what conclusions you will. Nobody ever talks about Tron 2.0, the first-person shooter made by Monolith, the same people who made Fear and Condemned. I'd rather talk about Tron 2.0 than Brianna. They had a Game Boy Advance spin-off. Had first-person full 3D sequences where you've got to fly a recognizer and a light tank. You fly a recognizer in first person. Before I move on, I need to talk about Chloe Segal. I want to be clear, I do not want to sensationalize Brianna's relationship to Chloe. But during this period, trans game developer Chloe Segal had a public falling out with Brianna, claiming that Brianna ruined her life and refused to help her. Chloe sadly ended up taking her life in DMs that would later be leaked. I think Brianna comes across as less than sympathetic in the midst of Chloe breaking down and pleading with her. Again, I want to be very clear here. I bring this up mostly so that there isn't 1,000 comments talking about this piece of internet lore and trying to blame it on Brianna. I think at the end of the day, Chloe was a deeply troubled person and didn't get the comfort and support all people should have when going through some really hard shit. And when people feel helpless and like there's nowhere else to turn, sometimes it can end very badly. And I also won't pretend to know what it's like to have someone you know do that and then spend the rest of your life wondering if there was more you could have done. I imagine that is what Brianna struggles with, and she doesn't need any other kind of invective to deal with around this particular issue if that's the case. What I can say is that suicide is never the answer, and you always have someone who will go out of their way to help you, so don't be afraid to reach out. Nobody is a burden.
Yeah,
so
just
don't
reach out to Brianna. Just don't reach out to Brianna. That would not be good.
Or fabricated. That doesn't mean she deserves to be blamed for something horrible like this. And I want to go on record, I don't think she should be. There are valid parts of Brianna's story to call attention to. This isn't one of them. And like I said, I bring it up specifically to stop any speculation that might happen in the comments or questions about why I don't explain it later. So with that out of the way, let's get back to some Gamergate-related happenings. Again, as loath as I am to source these dorks, sites like Bounding into Comics were some of the only people noting Zoe Quinn's displeasure at Brianna's announcement in 2021 that Brianna had begun working on a Gamergate TV series. And I think that this TV series, which thankfully never materialized and sounded awful, consisting entirely of fictional characters, is actually a really good capstone to understand how Brianna fits into Gamergate. Where people like Zoe and Anita tried to move on and have been vocal that they don't want to keep being defined by this period in their lives, Brianna continues to find ways to bring her involvement back into the spotlight and even attempts to continue monetizing it as part of her creative endeavors, like the ill-fated TV show. And if you thought Brianna, Zoe, and Anita had some kind of kindred bond, think again, as in these 2022 DMs I received, Brianna shit talks her fellow Gamergate targets, accusing them of being bad about trans people and trying to hog the spotlight, which is ironic, considering all Brianna did to be defined by Gamergate. But still, she didn't want to just be defined by Gamergate, as she writes in the self-aggrandizing 2015 article in The Guardian. Quote, I was at a bar a few weeks ago having drinks with a well-known journalist. Do you think my career is going to be defined by Gamergate? I asked him worriedly. He looked me dead in the eye and said, I think it depends on if you can pivot. At some point, you...
Okay, let's skip ahead a little bit. Oh.
My career. She was very incompetent. She seemed...
Okay, people hating working with her. Oh, okay, now we're getting into The Office.
Brianna's political ambitions came on a wave of progressive sentiment that emerged after Trump's 2016 electoral win. And by several interviews, she seems to have aligned more with what she would eventually call the radical leftists. I want to call quick attention to this early interview Brianna did in 2017, where when asked about her roadmap other people should follow for getting involved in politics, she advocates running it like one of her startups. We remember her startups, right?
Yeah, the one she ran into the ground.
Getting a lawyer to look at FEC rules when her campaign would fail to meet those standards for filing, but that's a little bit later. Again, however, we see Brianna's ever-present overconfidence, much like she took on the game industry with no experience and started an animation startup with no experience. She pursued a congressional run with no actual political experience, even as a commentator. Unless you count a variety of articles with very little oversight, she had managed to get on a variety of websites in the years since 2014. I'd also not be doing my due diligence if I didn't mention her self-designed campaign logo. Like, all of those years in art school and being an artist had to be good for something, right?
What is this? What is this? What am I looking at? Graphic design is my passion. What am I looking? What is this supposed to convey?
Well, alas. Relatively fresh from her Gamergate spotlight, Brianna got some press coverage for this congressional run, but it wouldn't translate to anything being actually done at the polls. In fact, she didn't make it past the Democratic primaries, meaning she didn't even have enough support to be put on an election ballot. She also forgot to file with the FEC or Federal Election Commission, as these publicly available documents show. And you might ask...
Oh my god.
Well, even if she didn't have a lot of experience in the campaign, didn't get very far, maybe she had good ideas. Her now infamous moon rocks tweet might provide some insight where she pontificates about the tactical value of moon rocks dropped from the moon to Earth. I really, really want to think this is just an incredibly deadpan joke. That's not...
The moon is... okay. This is being covered as a fun hijink for rich people, but the idea of a private corporation having access to the moon should give you pause. The moon is probably the most tactically valuable military ground for Earth. Rocks shot from there have... That's not how anything works! Wait a minute, what? What? Never. DuckDuckGo, you were supposed to be better than that. First of all, terminal velocity. Once something reaches terminal velocity, it ain't getting any faster. Second of all, does she think... Hold on. Hold on. I need to... Does she think... Hold on a second, guys. Hold on. Hold on a second, you guys. Okay. Here's my Photoshop. Does she think... Okay, wait a minute. So here's the Earth. And like a, I don't know, like a little... Does she think that if you're up here, you have a fucking rock? She think that you can like This is how Brianna Wu's brain works. Is that what she thinks would happen? It's not a good idea to buy moon rocks. The last guy I know who bought $3 billion of the stuff got moon rock poisoning. Is that a Portal reference? Oh my god. Is this... Put a bimbo in there. Okay. She gotta have the pointy ankle bones. The weird pointy ankle bones. There we go. Fucking can't. All right, back
exactly
we go.
Her style and would be odd to make during an attempted campaign. For further proof of her political insights, I point you to this campaign appearance she made in Massachusetts. She starts by selling herself as having spent her entire life in software engineering before jumping right into talking about Russia hacking the US and our infrastructure. Again, she wasn't really into software engineering and certainly wasn't for her whole life.
I've spent my entire life working in software engineering. If you've been watching the news at all today, you can see that we're having quite a few problems with Russia, information warfare, bot warfare, having our infrastructure hacked. There's even a story last week that came out that was showing how actually Russia had penetrated our power plants here in the United States.
She essentially humble brags here about having a Law & Order episode based on her life next, and then brings up that she worked for Hillary Clinton's campaign. Now, this is an aside that we will talk about more once we get to Brianna's current crop of podcast appearances, including her Dollcast podcast. But one thing I've noticed is that when speaking off the cuff, Brianna loves to name drop famous people, even when it has little to no bearing on the conversation. So just put a pin in that. This was one of the first times I'd actually seen Brianna speak, and it was really a moment where everything snapped into place for me. She talks a bit about how we need to get big, unaccountable, dark money groups out of politics, which would be very funny in a minute. All of the questions at the beginning are bizarrely given by her husband Frank, where she mentions also some of her friends she knew served in the Iraq War.
So today is the 15th anniversary of the invasion in Iraq. Some 4,000 Americans died, 100,000 Iraqis, maybe more, died. I know that you knew people that had served over there, many of whom had sacrificed a lot. What's your thoughts?
So I think more than anything else has happened in my lifetime. The Iraq War is really what defined me as a person. And I'm going to tear up here because
And on that note, I need a break. I'll be right back. Be good. I'll leave you with some music. I got more Fresca. I got some tequila. And I got a kiwi fruit. Let's go.
I had people I deeply cared about that gave their lives in that war. And it was 15 years ago today that we invaded Iraq.
Were these people real? Use your best judgment at this point. I'd honestly like to give Brianna any kind of leeway, especially when she's telling anecdotal stories about people who suffered in the war, but I can't, especially after literally everything she's done. But I want to talk about Frank. See, essentially she uses him as a surrogate for fielding questions throughout, and actually takes one from the crowd towards the end of the video, but it comes off as odd and stilted. Why not just take questions from the crowd the whole time, if that's who you're here to engage? The answer is probably because for Brianna, that no longer makes it a controlled environment where she can bounce between pre-decided talking points like her Iraq war friends and Gamergate harassment experience, and without those talking points, she's not able to name drop and verify her experience as much to a crowd who doesn't know who she is. And also because when she answers a question off book, it goes something like this.
Also, continuing the conversation about the climate change issue.
Absolutely.
A lot of the conversations around renewable energies, looking for hopefully best available technologies.
I've seen nanomachines that have the potential to solve some of this. I was actually on Jeff the other day and talking to someone about this. I'm going to tell you, I'm in Silicon Valley a lot, and I speak at MIT a lot. I've never seen a solution yet for that, but I do know we've got to really double down and quadruple down on our science to get us there. Trump is slashing the NHS. We're slashing scientific funding. So it frustrates me that my industry, technology, is often seeking out how to do better shaders for guns in video games or doing things that seem kind of superfluous to me.
Citing nanomachines. Congressional run. This was in 2018, and the candidacy, as I mentioned, would go nowhere, despite reportedly raising over $200,000 in funds according to Open Secrets. According to that same website.
Okay. So, we have the technology to basically have a very green country. Yeah. We don't need to be making as much pollution as we're making. We have the technology. It's implementing it. That is the problem. We have, like, nuclear energy, which is very green. And supplemented with, you know, wind and sun and water. We basically wouldn't have to need coal. But the problem is capitalism. Anyway.
Between donations and cash funding. Not unlikely from Frank Wu. Yet, in 2020, Brianna would run again and receive over $200,000 in donations for Brianna Wu for Congress, including contributions from both her campaign and from Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, who is running for Congress as well. I'll talk more about their link in a moment. The thing is, Brianna didn't even make it as far into the primaries as last time, dropping out and citing the ongoing COVID pandemic at the time. In a traditional Brianna fashion we've come to know and loathe by now, in a Medium post that signaled the end of her so far final political race, she went on to detail a very likely fictionalized, though still sensationalized story that, similarly to her story years earlier, would just so happen to perfectly represent a moment in her life and culture as a whole that she can illustrate to make a point. Think back to that story about seeing the little girl on her motorcycle. But when you look at the actual expenses of Brianna's candidacy, I can't help but ask the question, then where did almost $300,000 in donations go? Which might give you even more deja vu to Brianna's other projects and suspicious monetary incidents like the Kickstarter money that went to a non-existent person, and of course her startup at 19, that went nowhere. In fact, when you count up some estimates between the combined campaign costs of about $500,000, $200,000 for the animation studio, and an estimate of more than $400,000 for Revolution 60, Brianna's hit-to-miss ratio is like over $1 million in expenses across her career with almost nothing meaningful to show for it, let alone revenue to reflect the expenditures. Now, thankfully, much of what's been spent by the 2020 Wu campaign is publicly available on the FEC website. There are a handful of odd expenditures that might raise eyebrows, like the contributions giving Frank Wu almost $900 for travel expenses. Two other big payees, the Insurrection Inc. and Casale Keller Consulting, were paid in the several thousands and are consulting firms that purport to be against big money in Washington. So, I guess that's not big money by Washington standards. Many of the expenses are innocuous, like stamps.com and payments to Squarespace. But then they show several expenditures from the campaign to both Brianna Wu herself and Rebellion PAC.
Holy
a political
shit.
effort started by Wu and Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks. Rebellion PAC described itself as, quote, a clean PAC fighting for progressive working class values across the country. Rebellion PAC is electing leaders who fight for working class values and against wealth inequality. We are a hybrid PAC committed to electing leaders at the federal, state, and local level. We unapologetically stand for civil rights, gender equality, and LGBT rights. Welcome to a stronger America. Welcome to the rebellion. Notably, this rebellion has now metastasized into a politically driven money fund attached to Cenk, who has taken a broadly centrist turn and even appeared at a Turning Point USA event earlier this year. And Brianna, who in stark contrast with previous advocation against political PACs and dark money, now spends her days ranting about how trans people need to cut community with non-binary people, or really just any trans person she doesn't think meets her weird arbitrary definitions. Don't worry, we're getting there. But hold on, it's been a long journey, I know. But that brings us
I'm
to
very
Brianna's
excited for that
actions since
part.
2020, which have been the Rebellion PAC with Cenk and a stint at another political action group, Progressive Victory, and that's about it. Brianna was at the Progressive Victory PAC from roughly December 2023 to 2024, apparently working alongside Destiny Vosh, until she suddenly left. The PAC was simply organized to push Democratic canvassing efforts during the 2024 season from everything I've seen. Interestingly.
Oh, nightmare. Blood rotation. Destiny, Vosh, and Geffels. Oh my god. Get me out of there. I don't know what to say.
in some group chats I've been provided with, she still shit talks people like Destiny in private, at least she did in 2022, where she described hate watching his content, called him a narcissist, and she'd also go on to privately praise his Twitter account being suspended, saying, "Rip Bozo." Now, none of this would stop her from collabing with him 2 years later, so much for standards. The official Destiny wiki cites her leaving over a different vision for the pack. If I had guessed, this is another case of Brianna being hard to work with on group projects, which should feel familiar if you remember the Gamergate era group chat she was mentioned in and the testimony of people who used to work at her game studio. But I don't need to speculate. In fact, I know exactly that's what happened because I spoke to someone else who worked directly with Brianna on Progressive Victory, and they attest to her not only constantly shifting the blame, not putting in her portion of the work, but also being vindictive and unnecessarily rude. From an anonymous source who worked with Brianna at Progressive Victory. Quote, "This is just my experience having worked with her. It was really bad. There was instances where she made other people on the team cry." How? Just kind of an abusive approach to management. There was a time I was brought into a meeting and she asked, "Why am I not able to get a good emotional read on you?" And I was like, "I don't know, I'm on the spectrum." And I had to walk her through what autistic people experience in this meeting. And it felt really intrusive and gross. It was on the heels of another person on the team. They had come out of a meeting in tears and they told me about it. People were just very on edge around her. And even at the time,
imagine going up to an autistic person being like, "I can't get a good emotional read." I need to continue. I need to keep going. I need to keep going. I can do it.
I did not fully seem to trust her. They talk about how she was barely available and would shift the blame and didn't really actually seem to care that much about the work she was doing there. Quote, "She was supposed to be in charge of this project and effort, and she skipped half of the check-in meetings and was AWOL for a good portion of what I had been brought on to help with. Whenever she did get involved, it wound up being kind of a disaster. For example, when Progressive Victory would ask why we aren't meeting these goals, it would become my fault, even though I was doing what she had been telling me to do. And I assume no additional inputs meant keep doing what you're doing. She always found a way to make something somebody else's fault. You gotta do this, you gotta do this. Okay, I can... Getting new spots on podcasts, or in regards to she's a treasure source who's chosen to remain anonymous, Brianna likes to talk a lot about meeting with high-level Democrats, about organizing grand ideas that seem to never materialize, and when from Rebellion Pact.
Okay.
Digital Strategy Group is owned by Eric Coates and Sam Jacobson, who also own 1983 Labs LLC, which is a company that specializes in polling. Is this connecting a dot? I don't know. But I think it's interesting when Brianna apparently repeatedly talks so much about how she values and studies polls. Because honestly, I couldn't tell you what the fuck else Rebellion Pact could possibly be doing. Judging solely by the dead social media pages that haven't posted in 3 years, I think it's safe to say they aren't making a big push or about Rebellion. Andrew notes 2 of the largest contributors are Zeta Global and the current opinion
And very supportive. She actually
conversation with Eli Ehrlich for an entirely different video.
Here we go.
She also gave me some insight into Brianna's business style.
She actually reached out to me to help with a lawsuit, like, I want to say like 2 years ago, and was very kind, very supportive. She did not give a shit that I was saying that I would help people access hormones. And since then, I think she's picked up that she can get a lot of attention and a lot of money from going on this right-wing grift tour. It's such an intense pivot. It's fascinating. I don't think that she really necessarily believes all of it, but I think that she's scared. She's scared of the current administration.
Thank you for the super chat. Woo. Why can't I get a good emotional read on you? Me, skill issue. But imagine saying that to an autistic person. "Hey, autistic person, why can't I get a good emotional read on you? You've got like a weird, hey, little autist, you've got a weird vibe to you. What's up with that?" Like, what? Can you imagine?
And she thinks that throwing all other trans people under the bus will help her personally. I feel like her politics are evolving by the day as she gets more publicity and attention. It does seem to align with her general style. I mean, she quite famously laundered hundreds of thousands of dollars using her political PAC and has a penchant for attention. I mean, also, this is a multimillionaire. She has no real worries in the world.
See, as we see with Andrew Landra and countless times in the past, Brianna doesn't like being called out. It doesn't matter how suspicious something might look. It doesn't matter how many times she's had suspicious things happen near her. She really doesn't take any kind of accountability, always foisting the blame elsewhere or failing that, just ignoring the problem until it goes away. Now, despite never making any impact in any field she's ever been in, from writing to animation to game design to politics, she continues to wear all this massive amount of experience on her sleeve. She then uses this experience to get more exposure and spots on talk shows where she can authoritatively talk about politics because she's been a candidate. You see, she's part of Rebellion Pact. She must know what the fuck she's talking about. Insert callbacks for moonrocks, nanomachines, etc. From everyone I've spoken to, it seems like Brianna has mostly made it as far as she has by simply faking it until she makes it, relying on the trust of others to not question her or her narratives.
And then
From
she
the
doesn't
sources
make it.
worked with Brianna, specific details have been withheld to preserve anonymity. Quote, hearing her selling herself, her pitch was basically, well, I'm different because I have actual experience. And that was appealing because it seems like there's such a lack of experience-based perspective in the online political world. She spoke about her experiences in a way that did not initially set off my bullshit alarm. At least for quite a while, we had very similar political perspectives. I think I was blinded by the trust that she actually did so many of the things she claims to have done. Over time, I started to get more suspicious, and seeing how she was responding to certain controversies, I tried to do my own research on who she is and what she's actually accomplished in any of the organizations and roles she's claimed to have been successful in. With her, I was looking for reasons to believe she was who I thought she was. I wasn't looking for dirt. I was hoping I would look it up and find evidence of what she's claimed to have done. I even said that to, I said, hey, I'm getting the feeling increasingly like she either hasn't done the things she says she's done, or she's really bad at communicating it. I don't have anything concrete about her. I've looked for it, and it's always just stories, and just trust me. And because of her attempts to appeal to a more centrist...
Familiar, why is this so familiar? Familiar, like something I used to know. I'm going crazy, you guys. I'm going crazy. Familiar, but this time I've had some practice. No, we can't do this again. Okay. Ooh. a statement from myself and Self-Help Films regarding Brianna Wu. We have decided to end our association with Brianna Wu, who was initially engaged to help with fundraising for our upcoming film, the sequel to Envy Desire, titled Summer in Saint Anger. Unfortunately, Brianna's contributions have not met the need and expectations required to advance our goals efficiently. She was unable to deliver what we needed for the project, and it has become increasingly clear that we do not share the same values politically and interpersonally, and some of her recent political takes are indefensible and do not reflect mine or anyone at Self-Help Films. Summer in Saint Anger aims to speak to a different audience. We believe it is essential to work with partners who align with our principles and vision. Thank you for understanding and support. We look forward to sharing more updates and creating more positive collaborations in the future. Okay, interesting. All right. Enemies of Brianna Wu time. Let's go.
Publicly, she's been adamantly vicious about her stances on trans healthcare and her support of Israel's ongoing civilian genocide in Gaza. But she likes to couch this all in a pragmatic approach, that she's a serious political operative who really looks at the landscape and knows which way the wind is blowing. But behind closed doors, or at least in DMs, she's a bitch of a
Wait. Hold on a second. What was that about femboys?
approach, that she's a serious political operative who really looks at the landscape and knows which way the wind is blowing.
I do unironically think that if you're a femboy and want to take estrogen, you should be allowed to. See, this is where I can't go with y'all. Finster seems happy. HRT and transition work for trans people. There's science to show it. Not all trans people, but for people with gender dysphoria or who want to look a certain way, yes.
But behind closed doors, or at least in DM.
I feel like trans Twitter really roller skates past the real risks of HRT. Didn't you say DIY HRT before?
She's a bitch.
I'm saying I'm here.
Mean-spirited and tries constantly to rank.
No shit. Practice, you can't say that. Oh my god. How? Okay, hold on. Let me take a little. I think that tequila's been in my fridge too long.
Others to fall in line with what she wants. One of the more notable examples had to do with her playing the role of high school mean girl in leaked DMs about Bonnie, a trans woman formerly with TYT, when Bonnie was early in transition. In those same leaked DMs, Brianna would agree that pronouns had been pushed to insanity and say Bonnie looked like a transvestite, while agreeing that non-binary people were partly to blame for the anti-trans social shift. This, despite previous stances where she claimed to unequivocally support non-binary people. You see, these texts are just vicious bullying. By the way, there's no excuse for them.
Yeah.
These DMs came out in 2023, preceding the more broad right-wing appeal she's been aiming for.
I mean, listen, Brianna, Miss Wu. Can I call you Miss Wu? All I'll say to that vicious, mean girl bullying bullshit, honey, do not throw rocks if you live in a glass house. And that's all I'm gonna say on that. I'm not gonna say another freaking word. Not a single word about Brianna and how she looks. That is all I'm saying. Do not throw rocks if you live in a glass house. And that's it.
But they very publicly showed Brianna to be, at best, someone who advocated for things publicly she didn't believe in privately, and at worst, was an opportunistic liar. While Brianna would try and save some face by saying the leaked photos were out of context and limply try and take some form of accountability when she's actually backed into a corner, this kind of mean girl gossip is a common occurrence with her. In other DMs, like this leaked signal chat, she calls out other activists like Alejandra Caraballo as toxic, citing everyone Brianna knows who's worked with her. In that same breath, she accuses Aaron Reed of being cut from a toxic cloth and says that a group she's part of lacks integrity. We saw earlier how she shit-talked Destiny, but that's not the only person she worked with that she'd be disparaging of, as she in these same signal chats would claim Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks has shitty opinions and called up questions choices like this dilemma. I've redacted the names here, so if Brianna watches this, she might just know who these are from, or she might have just lost track of all the people she's threatened and disparaged and talked shit about. I think that's probably the more likely answer. Either way, I received several messages and DMs from other prominent members of the trans and queer community interacting directly with Brianna. These texts show who Brianna really is, how she tries to pressure others to fall in line with her political ambitions. She constantly tries to leverage others to agree with her, never attempting to be sympathetic to their point of view if it won't gain her something. On a personal level, I think these DMs show a genuine lack of empathy on Brianna's part, where she seems so blinded by her my way or the highway attitude, she ignores the experiences and ideas of others consistently. So by now we have a pretty consistent portrait of Brianna as someone who will bully others, shift blame, and deny most accountability, all the while touting experience and connections she really seems to just not have. It shouldn't surprise you that she is also trying to engage in hiring people to gather information on who she deems her political opponents. And I have the texts and emails to prove it. From another anonymous source in 2023, Brianna...
That domain, Missy. What? You just...
attempted to hire someone to compile information on local targets like Jackson Hinkle, offering thousands of dollars for essentially a bounty for people she didn't agree with. I do want to note that oppo research, or oppositional research, is a pretty common practice in Washington, D.C. political and lobbyist circles. But the way Brianna claims to go about it here is just so bizarre.
This is her pretending she's not Brianna.
Can't imagine anybody
sock
normally familiar
puppeting
with oppositional research and how dossiers like that are put together would look at this and be like, yeah, that's a completely normal way to go about business. She even went so far as to consult her lawyer for how to pay for the person she was trying to commission. I actually really like this letter from her lawyer, by the way, because it's written in the nicest legalese way. It seems like the lawyer is just trying to say, hey, don't. Now, being the masterful political operator she is, if you need more evidence that Brianna was behind this, she said this in a Twitter post in November 2023. In other messages, she claims to have already done this in the past, paying quite a sum for dirt on people who aren't named, though she gives an estimate between $5,000 and $20,000 she's previously paid for these dossiers, leading me to think there's been multiple? Now, is this Brianna weaving another strand in her ever-expanding web of bullshit? I don't know, honestly. If she was willing to go far enough to consult a lawyer on this, I don't see why she wouldn't have paid for this kind of thing in the past. If it was revealed that Brianna didn't intend to use these dossiers for blackmail or extortion, which is honestly the only reason I could see her doing this, it would have been insanely illegal.
Is femboy a slur? I will get into that. The answer is no, it's not a slur. Have a nice day, but do not call people a term that they do not want to be called. Thank you.
As not only is blackmail illegal, but Brianna likely would have been using funds from Progressive Victory and or Rebellion PAC. But with Brianna, I have no idea if all of this is bullshit. Like, she could have absolutely just been lying to this person and giving them inflated hopes for something that never would have materialized in the first place. And I can't help but wonder again, why? Brianna is not an elected rep. She's not even running for anything. She has a cushy job where she seems to barely do anything, but also can't stand opposition and loves to target people who disagree with her. Was she doing this for blackmail? Was she trying to extort someone? Why Jackson Hinkle? There's so many other questions that this leads us to, but the ineffable conclusion is Brianna is a snake who seems to see herself as some masterful political manipulator. I want to preface the last few sections of this video with these DMs and accounts of Brianna behind the scenes, because I think along with everything else we've dug through together by now, they paint a cohesive picture of who Brianna is. And even with all the plastic surgery she loves to show off, like Dorian Gray, that illustration is anything but pretty. See, modern Brianna isn't just someone
oh my god.
Who tries to force others behind the scenes to step in line with her while making snide jokes she thinks nobody's listening to. She's also taken, as I've mentioned several times now, a broad approach to trans ideology in an attempt to endear herself to more conservative minds. This includes hanging out with noted racist and white supremacist leader Lauren Southern as the two checked out Brianna's Porsche collection. I need to mention this so you don't forget that Brianna is still fucking incredibly rich apparently, and she continues to talk about and try to represent the struggles of a community that overwhelmingly isn't. Speaking of being part of a community or lack thereof, Brianna publicly came out as trans in 2014, and collectively everyone just kind of went, yeah, we know. And along the ride, there's been no shortage of fun tweets. Remember the KKK one? Notably, she's also buddied up to Richard Hanania. Now, Richard is your garden variety pseudo-intellectual who likes to use flowery prose to make basic observations about society seem profound. He's like a living version of those Facebook memes where someone's face chained to their phone, except he's also racist. He's written positively in the past about race science and eugenics, but most telling, I feel, about Richard was the time he shared a video of Grand Theft Auto 5 and thought it was maybe a real terrorist attack in Los Angeles. He deleted it, but unfortunately the internet doesn't forget. I've always found the best way to explain what someone believes is to let them say it themselves. To that end, I've listened now to over a dozen hours of Brianna's various appearances on shows like Trigonometry and The Dollcast to bring you her opinions in her own words without the Twitter character count. Now let's talk about The Dollcast. In 2024, Brianna attempted not to just rebrand herself, but craft a rebranded trans rights movement. Not my words. This is the description of The Dollcast, a podcast featuring 4 trans women.
I hate.
Dollcast is the...
If you've never seen Dollcast, it's garbage. It's just a bunch of rich white trans girls kikiing. Like, that's all it is. They're not fearless conversations. They're just, it's like it's like Desperate Housewives except they're trans girls.
trans rights reboot, less extreme, more thoughtful, and willing to have fearless conversations. As of writing, this podcast has been around for about 6 months and has less than 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's a wonder why when trans rights are constantly under.
Okay, if I got access to Brianna Wu's studio, I would shit on her floor and then leave. So don't let me in there. Because that would not be good for anybody.
Attacked by conservatives, and the only conversations Brianna seems to fearlessly care about is with dickheads like Richard Hanania. But more than her personal quirks, I want to talk about Dollcast because it represents Brianna's modern trans rights takes as well, and by which I mean it's essentially a group of incredibly sheltered and privileged women talking shit about anyone they don't feel adequately passes. They're purity tests for who really is or isn't transgender. Brianna also has a preoccupation with targeting non-binary people, and particularly trans-masc and trans-masc non-binary people buying into explicit TERF talking points, with no pushback from the other hosts.
That trans ad that is playing, I live in Massachusetts, and it is on the air every 4 seconds. I was walking out the bathroom at the movie theater the other day, and this ad comes on the air, and it's got like a trans woman with a very deep voice.
As a trans woman, I've been told diversity of strength is a transvestite, cross-dressers, non-binaries, eunuchs, and teenagers who watch too much anime have been lumped into our medical condition. Brianna, honey, if you're feeling self-conscious, you can be vulnerable with us and just say so. You watch too much anime, girl. I've seen your work. You're the one that watches too much anime.
And then it shows, Rachel Levine, and then it shows a bunch of drag.
See, and here comes the it's this shit, it's her shit that is like filtering out to the rest of the trans community.
Queens, then it goes into, Kamala Harris wants gender-affirming surgery for prisoners, and then it ends with the tagline like Trump is for us, Kamala is for they, them. It's using these caricatures of trans women as drag queens, and then using us to scare the public, and then linking like a bunch of ideas together, like drag queens, trans women, non-binary people into the soup to basically make people hate us, and it's a really dispiriting thing to see an election about, this explosion of very young children that are non-binary. I've got a really good friend of mine, he was telling me with the class, they were having a coming out day, and like half the class was raising their hand, not saying, hi, I'm gay or lesbian, but I'm non-binary. And it's not them saying I don't think that they're going through something real there. I'm saying that just pragmatically, if you've got armies of these kids coming out in schools, it is scaring the parents.
But maybe she's got some incisive political commentary to offer, what with having 2 congressional campaigns. If you thought that, those notions should be quickly dispelled. Episode 1 sees her basically blaming Democrats kowtowing to radical progressives for trans visibility, and in a roundabout way blames gender activists for the conservative victory and their fixation on criminalizing transness.
Like all 5 of us agree that this maximalist view on trans issues, this isn't what we want from the Democratic Party. What I find really frustrating is, I'm a little older than y'all are, in the trans movement, like how we got all these rights was going very slowly, piece by piece, and getting buy-in from the wider public. Like something I tweeted out last week was a copy of my Virginia birth certificate, which has been changed. I forgot to arrest a female, right? That is an accommodation that was put into law. It took time. There was buy-in from the public. What I think has happened in the last 5 years is a lot of the trans activists have convinced Democratic lawmakers of this maximalist vision of trans liberation that essentially comes to, it's a bunch of policy positions that turn the public against us.
Yes, it's the gender activists advocating for their rights in healthcare, not at all the pocket industry of conservatives dedicated to painting a target on a marginalized group, as the Democrats did literally nothing to stem the tide of hate. You're such a good political maverick, Brianna.
Oh, and I've had so many conversations with people. They don't like Trump, but they don't like the Democratic elitists more. They hate us more. They hate progressives more. They hate the people that announce their pronouns more. They hate the people that do land acknowledgements more. Culture in the Democratic Party. And
Okay. Keep watching. We can get it. We got through it.
Focus group, and they will sit down and say, well, if you want to talk to black people, here's how you do it. Use these words. You want to talk to women? Go use these words. You want to talk to Latinos? Use these words. And what ends up coming is you're like a robot trying to go down the list and please every single member of the coalition.
This is another common occurrence for Ramona Brianna to cite her political experience and say, trust me, the Democrats are taking this woke DEI stuff too far. This position has a few uses for her. It allows her to get more conservative voices to listen to her, to even see her as a reasonable trans voice, and it also allows her to further cite that experience when the Democrats inevitably fail at their flaccid electoralism attempts. The problem is that while this might be a useful talking point for Brianna, it's not based in reality, and probably more damning is actually just reciting the conservative framing on these issues back to them. See, she's accepting the ideas being pushed by people like Matt Walsh, Libs of TikTok, Charlie Kirk, and a dozen other slightly misshapen talking heads, acting as though their good faith arguments were based in reality. Effectively, she is re-gifting to her audience the same framework that is actively being used against people like her, except she's trying to cinch the frame a little tighter so she's not in the picture. The reality, again, very evident to most people in marginalized communities, is that Kamala Biden left those marginalized communities out in the cold in the 2024 campaign. Another reason Brianna can't talk about the real reasons Kamala failed is that Kamala supported the overwhelmingly unpopular ongoing genocide in Gaza, something Brianna bloodthirstily supports. Let's talk about episode 1, where she brings up the Trump campaign ad that said Kamala is for they, them. She notes it's an example of conservatives conflating non-binary people, drag queens, and trans women. And instead of noting that conservatives are regarding them as one and the same, the reason that they're doing that, Brianna, is because they regard any queer identities of any stripe as the same, because it threatens their platform that's based on traditional stereotypes and heterosexuality. She proceeds to just talk about how trans women should separate from those ideas and abandon what should be their queer siblings. But Brianna, that won't matter to the people who are already lumping you in with them. I don't know, maybe it's her conservative roots finally showing through, but this trend of just repeating conservative talking points and agreeing with them uncritically is ever present. For example, in the same first episode, she says in the 90s, non-binary kids would be called goth.
This is why I believe so strongly in transmedicalism. I'm fully with you. Kids need to be able to play with gender. Like, we just used to call these kids goth back in the 90s, right?
Okay. All right. Yeah, okay.
I think that's beautiful. I love that. And I want every single kid to be able to do that. I think the problem is when we're so quick to medicalize this. Kelly, I've used the talking point that you gave last episode literally 3 times this week talking to elected officials, where you were talking about how, like, when you think a lot of the people that start this, they just want to be able to talk about their feelings.
This is just repackaging the same tired social contagion talking points from TERFs who depict all trans teens as vulnerable little babies with no higher cognitive abilities, which is fucking wild to hear, especially from someone who claims to have gone through so much turmoil to find themselves in their 20s like Brianna. Episode 3, she opens talking about Buck Angel. Brianna seems to cozy up to people who hate her or, well, just openly disrespect her because in her eyes they'll quote-unquote have a conversation with you. Meanwhile, she seems to think the radical trans activists can't have a conversation probably because she blocks anyone that challenges her. See, she can take pushback from conservatives, but when people actually want to talk with her from the left, she'd rather call them, again, degenerate weirdos.
I mean, you guys know my politics. I have a lot to criticize about trans activism, but when it comes down to it, I will fight with gender criticals. I mean, my mission is our dignity, and I go to war on that every single day. What I found when I talked to Buck is, yeah, he does have those tendencies to go down those paths, but like you can sit there and talk to him about access to children transitioning. Like I have a view that there should be a small window open with extremely high standards. He disagrees, and he will talk about that. And I don't know. I think that's to his credit. There was tons of stuff we disagreed on.
There are other tidbits throughout the various podcast episodes that some might find vaguely strange, like when she talks about being in a medically induced ketamine hole, and that led her on a spirit journey where she was told she'd never be a woman. So apparently her inner woman is transphobic.
And it really changed my personality. It's not a mistake that a lot of the arc I'm on right now is after I did that, because it did make me feel very fearless about what I want to do. But one of the things that clinical ketamine does is you're sitting there and tripping and you're going into the K-hole.
I got stunlocked again. The what hole? The K-hole? I just... Look. I'm a good boy. I'm a good boy. I don't do that shit. I don't do drugs. I'm a good boy. I just wanna, like, fucking go out and buy my groceries without somebody being like, why do you look like a fucking dyke / faggot, depending on how long my hair is or how visible my ass is on any given day. You know what I mean? Like, that's all I want. I just want to be a dude doing dude things. I don't want to be taking no ketamine and going into the K-hole to talk to my transphobic inner self. I think that maybe you're the one. I think maybe ketamine would be good right now. I think that maybe Brianna is the one with the weird, freaky, fetishy, sex pervert gender expression. Fucking, like, making stripper sonas and getting high on ketamine to talk to her inner transphobe. I just... Like, she's a freak, right? Like, I'm not crazy. She's a freak. She is a freak, right? Like, I'm not insane. Right? Like, she is really weird. Like, I feel like I'm not trying to be an asshole, but like she's like, you guys are so weird and I'm just a normal girl. It's like, no, I think you might be the weird one. I think she's the weird one. And that's fine. I think people are allowed to be weird, but it's weird that it's odd to see her clinging to this idea of normalcy while being a fucking freak. You know? I'm sorry. I feel like I'm being a dick. A little bit, but I think she deserves it. But it's just like, no, I'm a normal, average woman anyway. I just want to be a bimbo, and estrogen makes me so stupid. And I can't even think about work without like, oh my god, that's a hair on my desk. And I... Girl, what are you talking about? What do you mean?
As I call it, and you really feel yourself stripped away. all these stories about yourself that you tell, all of it, it just gets taken apart one by one, and you're just staring there at the core of yourself. And this is so dark, but it's also really beautiful, that what I found at the core of myself repeatedly when I did that was this desire to be a woman. Like that fundamental thing that I want and cannot have, that's the essence of what I am. And I think that like leads to a melancholy and a pain that never leaves me ever. And you know, as I've like come to this realization that transitioning early would not have cured that, like do y'all feel that too, like this pain inside of you of all?
No, I feel like I transitioned when I was 19, 20, and now I feel like I am a man. And if you misgender me, that's your business, but you're wrong. I am a man. I don't think about how much, you know what I mean? I was like, man, I wish I was a man. I don't think like that. I just am a man. And I think that like a lot of trans people, especially trans people that have been out and have, you know, transitioned for as long as someone like me or Brianna, 90% of them, that's kind of how they feel. They're just like, yep, I'm a man / I'm woman / I'm whatever. And they don't think about it any more than that. Especially if they have medically transitioned, again, like me and Brianna both have. So, like, I think, again, this might be a you thing, Brianna. Maybe you should go get some therapy or something. I don't know.
Always going to be something that you can never become.
Somehow that actually makes a lot of sense for Brianna. Of all the insane claims Brianna's made, this is the one I actually have no problem believing. Another very telling incident was on episode 4 of the Dogcast, where in the first 2 minutes, Brianna talks about being in Boston, being sad about Trump winning, and on a whim, taking a vacation to Disney World in Florida with her husband, which is an insane concept to me. Like, I don't know exactly how wealthy Brianna is, but the idea of simply taking days off, community, trying to do
the trans community has completely failed to police our bad actors. Like, we have just sat here silently as it's expanded and expanded and expanded, and you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans, and any kind of medical safeguarding is oppression. And it's really unsurprising to me why the trans movement, you know, largely because people like me just stayed silent and didn't make a big deal out of being trans.
But the thing is like, how do they affect you? I don't care if somebody whose gender is dog, or that they think that they are, like, an alien from outer space and all of their gender is contained within the crystals of the universe. Like, I don't know. I don't fucking care. I don't get it. It doesn't really affect my day-to-day life, though. Yeah, maybe if she didn't try to act like she was better than everybody else, that she'd have an easier time. Like, she sees, like, trans people that she looks down. I think that's what it is. She sees trans people that she thinks are weird and freaks, and there's no way that you should be happy. And she sees them being happy with themselves. And yeah, this tracks, actually. She sees those people being happy with who they are and content, and it's like, yeah, they're weird. Like, I don't fucking know what they're doing, but they're whatever, I don't care. It's kind of my attitude. But she looks down on them so much, and she cares so much, and she feels so badly about herself that she sees people she thinks should never be happy because they are such freaks. And she compares them to herself, and she's like, well, I'm normal and I'm not happy. So something's wrong, and it's their fault. I need to make sure that they're unhappy. I need to bring them down on my level so I can prove that I'm the normal one, so that I get to be happier than them. I think that's what's happening.
Like, has grown to this place where you do have people with beards going into bathrooms and filming videos about it now. I mean, don't you think like we are somewhat responsible for this mess we're in?
But Brianna, the lying, manipulating, spotlight stealing, backstabbing, blame shifting, political renegade with no wins to speak of, she's the one we should be listening to. Okay.
Yeah.
So how has this attempt to establish herself as a more measured voice for trans women actually fared? Well, judging by the number of appearances she gets on more conservative shows like Tim Pool or Trigonometry and others, pretty successful, I guess, for her, she seems to relish being the token trans woman they can get to come on and repeat the things again they already believe. But she calls herself a Democrat. She doesn't like Trump, so somehow she's taking part in some grand exchange of ideas in the marketplace and having the tough conversations that need to be had. In 2024, Brianna would pivot almost entirely to argue for what she thinks are trans rights, which for her actually means excluding large parts of the trans community, as we've already gathered. Barry Weiss sums up Brianna well in the introductory paragraph of an interview piece that comes across far more cutting than I think Brianna intended. Quote, "There's no one quite like Brianna Wu. She's a trans woman who advocates passionately for trans healthcare, but also thinks many trans activists have lost the plot and are alienating women and feminists. She's a progressive who once called Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez one of the best politicians in America, but is also a staunch supporter of Israel. She was a victim of an alt-right cyber attack during the Gamergate scandal, but now thinks that the far left has become just like that mob. She's a feminist who has argued for more female representation in the gaming industry, but believes that diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts have gone way too far." End quote. If you didn't know everything we talked about in regards to Brianna, this seems like just a compelling portrait of a beleaguered political moderate, but in context, it kind of just lays out how Brianna has slithered her way through various positions that benefit her. See, Brianna hasn't just spent the last year repeating insane talking points with no credibility or evidence. She's continued to try and use those talking points to cozy up with notable members of the right-wing media ecosystem. The best she's managed so far has been showing off her Porsche collection to Lauren Southern and a chat on Tim Pool's show where they talked about Tim's favorite autistic hyperfixation, Civil War. There's her appearance on Trigonometry, which is apparently a real name people chose to represent themselves and the brand they live by. Trigonometry is apparently a podcast hosted by British Ozempic, Ben Shapiro, and a horse what they done put a wig and glasses on. I realize I try to go by more insult people based on their appearances, but that is unfortunately superseded by my other main rule, no mercy for the British. This interview is a perfect showcase of how Brianna is turning herself into a token for conservatives. Someone who is utterly unchallenging and will acquiesce to whatever they say, but gives them the ability to literally virtue signal to show how reasonable and rational they are for being open-minded enough to have a trans activist on. Which starts by her repeating her talking point about how the Dems are losing because they follow DEI and identity politics.
I went 20 years without talking about being trans as part of my public profile. I just never wanted it to be what my career is about. But the truth is, you look at the
Brianna, honey, you didn't tell people you weren't trans because you didn't want it to be part of your public career. You didn't want to get misgendered and attacked. Come on now, don't be silly. No. Nuh-uh, you were pretending to be cis. Just like a lot of trans women back in the day were pretending to be cis. It's fine, but don't act like it was, like, you have to do what you have to do to protect yourself. If you need to go stealth, go stealth. But don't act like going self. Actually, that was me being brave and true and honest and letting my opinions speak first and not my identity. Get out of here. Because you revealed that you were trans as soon as it was convenient for you. Get out.
That are driving our civil rights right now. I really worry if someone does not stand up and go, we've got to get this movement back to sanity, back to some public policy that people can agree with. I'm terrified about what's going to happen. There's a message you can give people, which is, look, this is my body, my life. I'm going to take this medication. I will accept the responsibility myself. Just let me go make my own choices. People are on board with that. They are not on board with, we're going to announce our pronouns when we meet each other, and if you screw that up, you're going to be socially ostracized.
Yeah, see, she thinks that the Democrats lost the election because they were too radical, which is the level of expert political announcements we can count on her for. Wonder why she was never elected. Yeah, it has nothing to do with the fact that, the Dems kept trying to reach out to the Republicans while the actual populist movement was just left out in the cold. No, yeah, great. Good job, Brianna.
I think there's an appetite in the Democratic Party right now in this moment to finally kick out the communists. I really do. I think there's an appetite to get rid of these people that have the same project as theocratic Islam. I really do think there's an attitude where we're going to be willing to our worst actors, including this French trans stuff, no matter what happens.
Yeah, Brianna's hatred for theocratic Islam is, well, she's very careful to preface it with being theocratic Islam. But again, if you remember her long history of anti-Arab racism and you factor in her, frankly, insane genocide support, it kind of just seems like she hates brown people in a very Ben Shapiro, bloodlusty kind of way.
And Israel, it's so disappointing to me that Israel in the last 3 months has taken out the world's trash for it. They've taken out Hamas, they've hurt.
Girl, no. No, you can't say taking out the world's trash.
Hezbollah, they've gone after the IRGC, and you would think Biden would be like, thank you, Israel, job well done. We've been trying to kill that guy for 20 years while the Marine barracks bombing. Instead, it's wagging our finger.
And for somebody who constantly is talking about how we need nuance in politics, she has no problem fear-mongering about Hamas having taken over mass mobilized marches even days after the world watched IDF soldiers slaughter medical non-combatants on video. But that to her, nobody cares. Yeah, Zionism is the other major hyperfixation for Brianna. At every turn, she seems to support literally any measure taken against not just terrorists, but anyone who might even be the same skin color, or profess support for children and citizens not dying. Like, for example, the support of a Muslim ban.
And just naturally, as someone that's on the left, you're like, Muslim ban? Discriminating against someone on the basis of religion? This is a bad idea. But so much of what I've thought about post-October 7th is if you look at the countries that this ban, which came from Obama,
She's just deep-throating her foot. You're gonna choke. Take it out. Take it out.
It's like these are countries with people that have some really dangerous ideology. There's a threat to American citizens. At the very least, we've got to aggressively vet the people we are letting in to make sure they are not going to start their own Amsterdam incident here in this country. So I'm so much more. I think that October 7th lifted the illusions from a lot of people's eyes across the right and the left. And I think we're going to see those kinds of issues grappled with more honestly this time.
Yes, what a Brianna, just a principled Democrat saying the fascist president is right for trying to not let people of certain skin color into the country. It's a brilliant political mind. If you want a real look into how little Brianna seems to know about the Gaza genocide, or more accurately, how much she willfully ignores, look no further than her interview with Mark Lamont Hill, which was an absolute embarrassment for her to say the least.
Most of the pro-Palestine movement are not Islamists. And
Gaza itself is an Islamist. Like it's trying to, it operates under
an Islamist.
We're talking about a movement, right? I'm assuming the people that you are getting comments from are not in Gaza. right? We're talking about the pro-Palestine movement. You're talking about people, for example, who are commenting from our exchange. Those people aren't in Gaza. The pro-Palestine movement is a global movement, and most of the people who are pro-Palestine aren't even Muslim, much less Islamist. Second, you can be Muslim and not be Islamist.
Yes, yes.
And so, you know, much of even historic Palestine, and I don't mean historically, I mean like much of the region right now, most Palestinians are Muslim, but most don't live in Gaza, and most of those people would not identify as Islamists based on all the polls, based on all the data.
Really, you don't think Free Palestine at its core is
an Islamist movement?
I absolutely think that.
What does Islamist mean to you?
This project to conflate Islam with the state and to usher that into a form of government.
She basically shrugs at the idea of kids being targeted and killed, kind of just saying, well, them's the breaks in war.
Every piece of the built environment nearly of Gaza has been reduced to rubble. I mean, it's at least at 80% now.
Oh my god. I'm sorry, Raccoon. Also, hi, Jazzy. When did you get here? She come to watch me suffer because I'm suffering right now. How am I gonna get through this game on Thursday?
Every school has been
Oh, it's horrible. It's horrible looking at the pictures, yeah.
But we also see the killing of doctors, we see the killing of journalists, we see the killing of educators.
It's really easy to say child killed, you know, all of this. There are a tremendous number of child soldiers that are working alongside PIJ, militants, working alongside Hamas. They're trained with weapons. It's horrible. Hamas is committing a war crime by using child soldiers, and that is a non-trivial number of those deaths. It's just an absolute fact. As far as, some of this technology of white phosphorus and all of that, I think those claims are really overblown.
Also need to bring up this wonderful chef's kiss of a moment where she says Kamala won't be affected by her support for Israel. I wonder why Brianna doesn't have a job at Rebellion PAC anymore.
Yeah, I think the fact that it doesn't look like the DNC is going to result in Chicago on fire, I feel really good about us just being able to kind of continue through the election.
And if that is the case, if what you prognosticate is accurate,
yes,
and I suspect it is, does Kamala Harris win?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be surprising then that, like her purposefully misunderstanding non-binary people, making it easier for her to villainize them and valorize her very smart and centrist positions, Brianna doesn't really care how much evidence of a genocide she's presented with. She has continually advocated for basically the entire total ethnic extermination of Gazans. And like most of the rabid Zionists, will fall back on tired arguments like Israel has a right to exist and Palestinian protesters are terrorist sympathizers, when really the only thing anyone is advocating for that she is against is Israel stopping the mass slaughter of women, children, and non-combatants. That's it. Again, this is the person who wants to present herself as a voice of reason, who knows what she's talking about. Her Zionist position might be the clearest example, but we've seen plenty how she just absolutely ignores
life matter is a communist utopia.
Like how do I even approach this idea that trans girls are indoctrinated?
Like cowardly? Instead, the trans movement has taken on this victimhood. And I'm opposed to it not just because it's politically cowardly, but it is taking an entire generation of girls that are just like me and telling them the thing that isn't gonna the thing that you're waiting for to make your life better is a communist utopia.
Like how do I even approach this idea that
did she just fucking like fully automated gay space communism in an interview, a real one? I really need some Pepto-Bismol for the diarrhea coming out of her mouth. Yeah.
Trans girls are indoctrinated into a communist utopia. What does communism have to do with defining concepts of gender? We could honestly be here all day watching her flap her overly thin lips, arguing total nonsense, but I really don't.
Miss Dead Domain. You can't. I simply work here. You said it, not me.
It's necessary. Skip through any podcast appearance she makes or talking head segment she somehow managed to finagle. You'll see this highly qualified Politico stumbling through the same lukewarm takes we've heard dozens of times with no substance behind them. But it is catching up with her. She can only be insulated by money and what connection she actually has for so long. Now Brianna spends her days arguing online, in her own mind besieged as one of the last holdouts of true transness with other people she now apparently calls comrades like Blair White. Recently she claimed to have a debate with Blair because she's got nothing left to generate views except causing tired controversies. But here's how that debate went.
I agreed with you. I 100% agreed with you.
Oh.
To the kids' point that you brought.
Oh, she don't like Blair because Blair's prettier than her. Let's go.
Blair. I really feel you. I do want to agree with you strongly, because I think, Blair, what you said about children growing out of it's very true. You're talking like there's a ton of surgery on children, and I fully agree with you for these FTMs. You said something at the beginning of this.
I totally agree with you for these FTMs. Hello? You can suck my... Anyway.
Which is trans women don't have, we've been run out of our own movement, which is 100% true. This non-binary fringe has come into it, and to use Free Palestine's phrase, they've colonized us.
Yeah, I agree. Just to, expand slightly and then we can move on. Is like, I completely agree. It's like,
here we are. We're two trans women that feel like our civil rights vehicle has been hijacked by lunatics. How do we, trans women, actual trans women, not pretend trans women, not non-binaries, how do we build something where we can have a say in our own healthcare again?
She may have found new friends, or at least people willing to use her as much as she uses them for exposure and clout.
These fucking the FTMs. The FTMs are coming to get me. They're coming to get me, she says. The FTMs, they've stolen my civil rights movement. Okay, but like... Okay, but like... Brianna is rich. She's fully transitioned. She could probably get hormones shipped to her door from other countries. She would not be affected by anti-trans laws, really. It feels like she just doesn't want to be associated with weird trans people. Right? Because she would, at this point, she wouldn't be affected by anything like that. At all.
But like I said at the beginning, Brianna doesn't have a community. And if the trends in her behavior, both in front and behind the scenes, are anything to go by, she'd talk shit about literally any of them in a group chat the second she thought it might get her more popularity with someone with a slightly larger audience. So it's not surprising that most of her time seems to be spent arguing on social media with accounts like me.
I love, as a stinky, awful, shitty little FTM, I love colonizing trans women. Look out, trans women, I'm gonna colonize you. I'm gonna colonize your movement. I'm coming after your movement. Every single one of you, I'm coming after you. I'm gonna get you. Me, the nasty little FTM. I'm gonna take... See, I hate that. I hate when people... And she's not the only one that does this, but a lot of, like, millennial and Gen X trans women will call trans women, and then will call trans men FTMs. Did you ever notice that? Because Blair White does it. Brianna Wu does it. Dare I say, Julia Serrano does it. Hey. I'm gonna colonize you so good you're gonna pay me to do it. Okay, now I'm gonna stop flirting with my chat now and play the video. I'm going crazy.
I think the point I really decided to make this video was shortly before Brianna blocked me, where she said non-binary people aren't trans, to which I responded, I'm transgender, I'm non-binary. I go through trans healthcare. I get electrolysis. I've been on hormones for years.
Why do they do that? Is because a lot, not all obviously, but I think that there are, and I think this goes in both directions, honestly, in a lot of ways, but I think we see more prominence coming, it's hard to say. It presents itself in different ways, right? And I think the way that trans masculine people do it towards trans women is different. It's bad, but I think they project it in a different way. And I think it's like, you are giving up the thing that I want. You're rejecting it. And you're taking the bad thing that I spent my whole life running away from. And they see it as something very personal when it's like, I'm just doing what's best for me and this has nothing to do with you. Right? They see a lot, like, again, this is like such a small vocal minority, but it's like you're throwing away your good female body that I could have used. And you see it a lot, like, it kind of like also works itself into conversation where it's like, I wish that we could just switch bodies. And it's like, I don't. I want my body. I just want to trans my gender. I don't want your body. I want my body. I just want to change it a bit. You know?
To which she responded by saying, I'm not non-binary, I'm transsexual. Brianna, you can call yourself whatever you want. But your problem is that because you think you've come to know yourself and realize your gender journey, you think you can speak for everyone else.
Yep.
And you make no effort
Exactly.
to Exactly. Don't let her inability to see the world from a less privileged perspective, her lack of any kind of empathy for the struggles of someone else, distract you from the fact that first and foremost, Brianna Wu is an opportunistic, manipulative liar. She shouldn't be trusted, not because she never knows what
Get her
about,
ass.
but she'll say whatever she thinks you want to hear if it will get you to support her and get her
Snatch the weave right off her head, rip it off by the
From
roots.
the very beginning, her time in college and her work on an animation studio that crashed, her career has been defined by an abundance of unearned confidence, manipulation, volatility, and a lack of any consequences. So maybe this video will do nothing. Maybe it's just preaching to more of the choir who already have her blocked on Blue Sky, but I'm honestly okay with that. If, on the other hand, Brianna were to lose her power and influence, it should be seen as due rewards for her history of lying and coercion. If she has no friends or no political career because she is finally seen by all
Rip
the
out
corrosive,
that
toxic person she is,
fucking
I have no
wig.
problem.
Rip
Even
it.
if all of that were to happen, she'd be fine because she's fucking rich. But regardless how any of these things behind the scene coming to light affects her, I can say one thing with certainty. In the end, Brianna won't have anyone left to stand up for her. She won't have anyone left to bring her on podcasts and pay her for being a consultant, at least not if she continues the way she has for decades, and that has nothing to do with a YouTuber compiling a deep dive. It's all by her hand. Goodwill is not an unlimited resource, and Brianna has stripped the mountains of her career dry of any goodwill she managed to wring from Gamergate, from her political career, and from what sparse experience she actually has. So in the end, if Brianna Wu ends up alone, isolated, and hollow, it's not because of the rest of the world. It's because it's what she's always been building towards through her own actions.
Yes.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for sticking around to the end of what is now
Exactly.
undoubtedly a pretty massive, and I know...
Thank you so much, Dead Domain. Okay, so if you want to go see that, it's on Dead Domain's channel. I've seen a couple stuff from Dead Domain. It's called The Lies of Brianna Wu. If you want to look at watch it at normal speed, that was something. That was something. Let's go look at her. Let's go look at her Blue Sky page. Let's go look at her Blue Sky. And then we'll call it a night. Is she still with her husband? As far as I know. Let's shrink that. Nope. Let's chuck this down here. Let's just do that. All right, let's look up this lady's Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever. I'm curious. Oh. We're off to a strong start. Is she in Israel right now? No, how do I don't know fucking how to use this fucking website. Woo! Okay, so she is in Israel right now. So she's in Israel. This is crazy. If you thought I was a Zionist before I landed in Israel in 4 hours, I can already feel my power growing. I need more tequila. I need more tequila. Help me. Help me. I want to die now. You're not allowed to call anybody a sex freak ever again, Brianna, you fucking weirdo. Oh my god. The Islamists. This is sad. This is really sad. Girl, baby, kitty, honey, darling, you do not look like that. I'm sorry, but oh my god. Oh my god. She is delusional. I mean, like, yeah, you look fine, Brianna. You look fine. You look fine in some of these pictures. But this is a weird person to compare yourself to. You do not look like that. You look fine for a woman in her 40s. You look fine. But, like, you look like a woman in her 40s. I don't know what to tell you. You look like any person that I would see in the suburbs. So it's really weird to see her compare yourself to fucking... You look fine, but you look like somebody's mom. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I'm glad you're feeling your oats, honey. Like, I really am, but, like, oh my god. Alright, I'm gonna start getting mean. I'm gonna... Yeah, she looks like a Karen. I didn't want to say it, but she does. Like, she looks fine, but she just looks like a Karen or like a mom. Like, I don't know what to say. Yeah, you look fine. You look fine. But you look like somebody's mom that you might bump in at the grocery store. It's just not... I don't know. Maybe I'm being mean. It's just, like, not something that I personally would brag about on social media. Like, fine. If you like how you... I don't know. Okay. Maybe I wouldn't be being so mean if she was not such a bitch about other people's appearances. Okay, but, like, work, bitch. Work. I find this exciting. Definitely the one on the right. I wouldn't want Brianna Wu to represent a dead fucking dog. If I'm honest with you. Okay. Okay, I'm getting... my brain is rotting out of my skull. Oh my god. I'm gonna... This is like the exact opposite of what you claimed. You said you got laser like weeks after. Okay. Okay. Okay, I can't look at this anymore because it's actively hurting my brain. It's hurting me. It's hurting me. This is hurting me deep in my soul. And I can't do this again. I can't do this again because I'm going to drive myself crazy. We will play... Okay. I'm going to start wrapping up the stream. We will play Revolution 60 if I can get it running on my computer. There is a Steam release. So we will play Brianna Wu's game, Revolution 60, on Thursday. It'll be the only night I play it. If it's dog shit, we'll play PN03 instead, which is a game I actually kind of like. And then we will never talk about Brianna Wu on this channel ever again. Even if she calls for my death. I will one more stream on her, which is the actual thing that I wanted to talk about, which was her weird fucking game. We will play the game. And then that will be it, and I will never talk about her again. And that'll be on Thursday. So if you're interested, make sure you're subscribed and make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I go live. Play us out, Toby Fox. If you would like to support me on Patreon, there's a link down in the description below. Thank you for my patrons: Harvey Hummus, Mohammed Page, Boggle Fiona, Easy Walker, Elias, Liam, Shy, Space Frog, Swampling, and to my staff, Mothra, Squeakers, Boggles, and Sparrow. And if you would rather do a one-time donation, you can find a link to my Ko-Fi in the description down below. If you subscribe to my Patreon, you also get to come onto my Discord and other cool little perks. My social media is also in the link down below. I stream on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays, and I occasionally release edited content. I'm gonna drop you guys off with somebody else that is streaming at this hellish hour, if there's anybody. And there is not. So I'm just gonna abandon you to the void. Have a great night. Make sure to make good choices this week. Bye-bye.